Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Breakfast Club Jamboree. To start off with, we have our friends Brian and Raven. Hello, how's it going? Brian,
Hi.
I like your new moniker, non-American. It's obviously literally appropriate and also kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the wild card. I'm the odd man out, as it were. So, you know,
You're the one who's allowed not to get it, Brian, and that's okay.
I am.
No, but you've had plenty of experience with Americans, obviously, up close and personal, as well as like over the years, I'm sure. I mean, I know from my own experience living in your country that the Brits have a pretty amusing perspective on America, especially over the past sort of 15 years or so, ever since the George Bush thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Personally speaking, my view of America and Americans has been it's been a roller coaster ride. It has.
I'm sure it's never been lower than it is right now.
I don't know. Being married to an American, it kind of has subtly influenced the way that my mind processes things coming out of America.
Okay.
I think I am probably, rightly or wrongly, I think I'm probably letting a lot of things ride that I maybe shouldn't do because, for, again, rightly or wrongly, one reason or another, I've sort of pushed myself into a place where I can put my mind into the mindset required to think in a certain way. So, much to the chagrin of my beloved wife, I can actually see some of the right-wing arguments. But then, as I've tried to explain before, when we've been having these left-right discussions, from my perspective, you all are right of center. Yeah, even your lefties are righties as far as my personal political compass goes. So, yeah, when I hear these conversations about, well, the left is this and the left is doing that, I'm thinking, no, it's not the left, it's the right light.
The right light.
Yeah. From a global perspective,
Okay, well, yeah.
As I said, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I do. I mean, when you look at the way things are now, I don't know. If I had, Sherman set the Wayback, right? If I had a Wayback machine and could go back to myself in like the 1980s and say, dude, you won't believe it, but Donald Trump is going to be president someday, I would have just fucking slapped myself. And I would have been sure that it was somehow phony,
If it was the 80s, I would have probably punched myself in the throat, called myself a liar, and just, jumped in a cab or walked the opposite direction or something.
Yeah.
But then, actually, would I, though?
Yes.
Because Ronald Reagan was president at the time.
Yeah, but he was
so
governor
the thought of
that.
Yeah, true, but as governor, he didn't really hit our consciousness very much back then. It wasn't until he got elected president, and it was like this ex-Hollywood film star is becoming the most powerful man in the world, and it was like, what?
Yeah, Reagan was always out there. Before he was governor, he was always out there. He was kind of famous for being a Hollywood who was against communism, Hollywood guy against communism and all that.
Yeah, but there was always as a Hollywood personality. I mean, it didn't really, it certainly as far as my political hemisphere or awareness was concerned, wasn't until he, became president or was running for president. But then I
one of the things
I was still fairly green.
He was, governor of California, and being the governor of California is, overseas, it might not seem like a big deal, but governor of California is a big deal because it is at the time when Reagan was there, It was like the ninth largest economy on the planet. Um, and now it's like the fifth largest economy. California's a big California's a big deal. To be the governor of California is like being a president of a country. So
Hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it was a big deal when Schwarzenegger became governor of. I mean, that made international news. Everybody here was aware of that.
Yeah, good old Arnie. I was obviously living in the UK during that period of time, so I have no opinion about what kind of governor Arnold Schwarzenegger was. I have no idea, whether he prospered or the state prospered. Well, he was. I have no idea at all.
Yeah.
But I'm
Just
just.
want to say hi to Vegas in the chat, by the way.
Oh yeah, hello everybody. Um, I'm just surprised that someone like Schwarzenegger, who had a reputation in Hollywood for being a bit of a little bit woo, shall we say? Yeah,
He did.
and still, he still managed to get elected, and it's terrifying to contemplate that it might just take high name recognition to get into public office. In the current, I mean, we live in a time where I'm not sure if it was true about 2020, but previous elections, they used to say that more people voted for Pop Idol than voted for the president. You know what I mean? Just in terms of population percentage.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I've noticed, because I'm going to be 60 next year, so I guess I've been politically aware for about 40 odd of those years, maybe 45. But one thing that I've noticed with our politics is that we've gone, because I can remember some of the earliest elections that I showed an interest in. It was all about the policies. It was all about, okay, if I'm elected, this is what I intend to do for the country. And I've seen it shift from that to being what we have now, which is basically a popularity contest. And the winner, as we can see in the what's happening with the Labour Party right now, the winner is not necessarily the best candidate for the job. It's the one that survives the smears and the slurs. And that, to me, is the one thing about American politics that first struck me as being, really? You want to operate your country on that basis, popularity contest? And that's kind of how I've always seen the presidential race. It's always about who's able to get the biggest exposure to the most people to get the the greatest popularity. And there doesn't seem to be, correct me if I'm wrong, but there doesn't seem to be any spending limit on that. Whereas here we've got very tight controls on how much you can spend for a campaign.
When previous to Citizens United, there was definitely more spending controls than there are now. I mean, in the most recent presidential election, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Michael Bloomberg spent like $100 million to make sure Trump didn't win the presidency.
Yeah, exactly. And that sort of campaigning, negative campaigning, I don't remember ever seeing that here when I was growing up as a kid and as a young adult.
I mean,
and
Ray,
so the modern landscape.
We've had since even before the famous the George Bush, was it Willie Horton? Was that the guy's name? Who was let out of prison on a day release and committed a crime, and then George H.W. Bush used that against Michael Dukakis because that happened when Michael Dukakis was governor, and that was seen at the time as a really low blow and a really sort of dirty smear campaign tactic, but it seemed to work because one of the most unlikable people to become president became president. I mean, I hated George H.W. Bush at the time. Not that I like Michael Dukakis that much either, but
Yeah. I mean, to me, this whole least worst option type voting, it's just such an anathema to what democracy should be. Yeah. I mean, when when you're offered the choice between a shit sandwich and
And a giant douche.
yeah, at the end of, well, not necessarily a giant douche, but shit on toast versus a shit sandwich, you're still getting shit and bread. So I can understand voters choosing not to want to vote for either of those.
You
So
can't
it's like,
understand why
okay, I'm out.
cooked is better than raw. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, but let's face
seriously,
it, you
no,
can't polish a turd. You can't polish a turd. And
no.
yet, last 4 years, we had a gilded turd.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I mean,
I mean,
the entire system probably has been corrupt our whole lives, but I mean, certainly in the past 40 years, the corruption's taken on a different dimension and is a bit more
I
blatant.
mean, 40 years ago, the United States was on this, riding this, crest of the new technology from the space program and all of this stuff. Yeah, and the 80s was a real potential, you know, decade, and it could have been so different. But
Reagan,
yeah,
Reagan.
yeah,
So I mean, like
conservatism.
the giant douche and the shit sandwich. I mean, like the problem was, I mean, although there are obviously like Vegas will not agree with this, but I mean, I think it's obvious that Hillary Clinton would have been so much better in office than Trump. Um, but
As a statesperson, yes, I agree
yeah,
with you.
right. And for policy and all kinds of reasons. But the problem was people decided to go with the devil they didn't know. Um, people, it was like Hillary is not likable, never was. And then I know, there are people out there that love her, and they were like, going on and on and on. It was really, I mean, I hate to say this, because I've had conversations with tons of people who are just like, I'm voting for Hillary because it's time for a woman, and I'm like, that's not a good reason.
No,
I mean, you might be right, you know, but
Well,
that's not a good reason.
we've had two women premiers, and both of them have screwed us.
Yeah. So I was
Yeah,
a gender doesn't mean anything as far
no,
as
it
all.
doesn't.
But there were people that voted for her for that reason. But for the most part, she was just really unlikable. Um,
I
and
have a
so like
question.
people voted for Trump because, well, they didn't really know what to expect from him, so they went
right.
with the devil they didn't know.
Yeah, I have a question about Hillary. It's one of the arguments that I heard in 2016 for not voting for her, and that was that she was a warmonger, and if she was, one of the first things that she would have done when she hit office was declare war on, I forget who it was,
Iran.
probably Iran. But certainly, her being a warmonger was one of the reasons why people purportedly weren't voting for Hillary.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how correct that is.
Oh no, she's a hawk. Yeah,
Right.
she's a hawk. She yeah, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, from that perspective, I guess I'm kind of glad that Trump did get in. And
Well,
from another perspective, one thing that he did promise to do, that in my estimation he did actually do, yeah, albeit by example, was he did throw a real wrench into the system and show all sorts of flaws. I mean, the way that he was able to corrupt the Justice Department,
yeah.
etc. Yeah. The way he's now living at large as president in exile in Mar-a-Lago, and everybody is
Holding court
still
in
trekking
Mar-a-Lago.
down to kiss the ring. Yeah, I mean, it's just so. On the one hand, it's not American as I perceive American or Americana. I'm not sure what the right declension is to be. But on the other hand, it is very typical of a, air quote, republic, particularly an American republic. And I'm thinking, some of the so-called banana republics that you find in South America that are absolutely rife with corruption. Yeah, all the way up to the top. So, yeah, it does strike me, strictly speaking, as being very consistent with republicanism if you take the mean average of what republics do. So,
Ouch.
eh, it could be my pregabbling. I don't know. I have
I
a
don't
lack of
know. I
social
mean,
filters these days. I'm just
let me
saying
flip
it.
that around on you, though, Brian. Let me flip that around
Yeah,
on
sure.
you. I don't believe for one second that there should be any such thing as a monarchy in Britain or any other country, right? So
True.
if Britain became a republic, do you think it would suffer from the same problems you just described?
Yes, I do. I do. I think we're suffering from those problems now.
You mean your
Um,
monarchy hasn't saved you from those problems?
no, no.
Okay.
I'll tell you something about monarchy. Yeah. And this may be radical. It may be, what's the word, controversial. I don't know. To me, having watched loads of documentaries and docudramas and things on the Vikings, and having had a special interest because I grew up near Dallinghoo, and there was a huge Viking burial ship that was discovered there when I was a kid, or shortly um, before I was a kid. But European monarchy is the last vestige of Viking supremacy. And I'll tell you how you can chart that. The Vikings went east, yeah, and they were known as the Rus. They formed Russia. Russia culminated in the Romanov dynasty, and the majority of the European monarchy in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries were direct descendants of the Romanovs. So, albeit a very convoluted route, monarchy traces itself back to Viking conquests and early monarchies. So, as empire builders go, the monarchy is proof that the Vikings have probably so far done it best of all, because they've lasted, what, 1,500 years? Something like that?
Hmm. Well, I mean, to me, I kind of understand where you're going with that, or where you're coming from, I suppose, rather better way to put it. But from me point of view, my bloodline, schmudline, that's what I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know
the
we
whole
know what that
thing
sort
was
of
made
breeding
up. It
does.
was made up a long time ago and maintained for far too long. And the sooner it's
Yeah.
completely abolished, the better the world will be.
Yeah,
That's my
we
opinion.
know what inbreeding does. We do. We know that very well.
Yeah. Shadow is going to kill you says royal family is essential to keeping relations to the countries within the Commonwealth.
Well, in its current form, yes. There are a lot of countries out there, including one of your national favorite holiday spots, Jamaica, which
Hello?
caters.
Hello.
Hey,
I hear you.
Oh, sorry. Hi. Am I coming through all right?
Yeah, you're fine.
perfectly.
No camera?
No, Cameron, not at the moment.
You wanker.
That sounds like another English accent.
Sorry, that is me. Shadow is going to kill you. That is me in the chat.
How do? Good to meet you.
Good to
Put a
meet you.
voice to the name. So yes, yeah, to expound on what you were saying in the chat room.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, the monarchy is going to be abolished I don't think, because it is sort of essential to the Commonwealth. You see, the Commonwealth is a selection of countries which were previously colonized by the British Empire, from what I can gather. And the countries in the Commonwealth are the countries that we have given independence with, but they're still a part of us.
True.
And the Her
Culturally
Majesty the
speaking.
Queen is the head of the Commonwealth. Culturally speaking,
Yep,
yes.
true.
And that's how I feel that the monarchy isn't going to be abolished and become a democratic republic like the United States, because the monarchy is somewhat basically
here's
is
a question,
To be fair,
legitimate question for you. What's the Commonwealth ever done for you?
Yep.
loads.
Well, to make the Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, there's sporting relationships, there's trading relationships, there's migration relationships.
Of course.
Sure.
So
this is my first time in the Breakfast Club.
Yeah, welcome.
it's good to have another Brit.
Yeah, my whole thing about the Commonwealth, frankly, is, I mean, it's the same as I think when people say, "Oh, the British monarchy is good for tourism." I mean, people don't come to see the Queen. You couldn't see the Queen if you're British very well, much less if you're a tourist. You know, you go to see the castles, you go to see the stuff, and the stuff is still there. And I feel the same way about the Commonwealth. That can be politically maintained with with a non hereditary head of state.
I'm going to have to kind of agree with you that that does sound like a pretty shallow argument. It's essential for tourism. Well, it is, but not really, are they? I mean, we still have castles all across England. Most of them are demolished or being destroyed, and you got the English Civil War to thank for that. But yes, we do have a lot of history in the United Kingdom, and that's what tourists come to our country for, to learn our history, because our history is somewhat a little bit more unique. Do I dare say?
Britain's the only country in the world that might have a worse personal history than America. It's close, but
I'd just like to just like to push back a little bit on what you were just saying there, Paul.
Okay.
My mother actually was presented to the Queen, so my mother has actually met the Queen. So does my grandfather and my grandmother, because they were both honoured for their services during World War II.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So,
but you have to admit that's unusual, right? Most British people can't make such a claim.
Well, true.
I mean,
but
back in the day when the Queen was opening hospitals and you know, gardens in the middle of towns and villages and stuff like that, you know, you could definitely be there on a line. I was in Dorchester nearly 30 years ago when the Queen came to the Borough Gardens, and there were all the kids lined up along the line saying "Hello, Mom" and all that kind of stuff. But you're not really meeting the Queen; you're just watching her walk by. You know.
Well, I've had that experience myself in a little market town that I grew up in her Silver Jubilee year when she was doing all the various tours.
Right.
I actually saw her go round the market square.
I can tell you right now, I would have loved to have been in Britain for the Jubilee, man. That looked pretty cool.
Oh, street parties all over the place. That was incredible.
I was in for the Golden Jubilee, mind you, but that didn't seem to be anywhere near as what. Maybe things just look better when you look back at them. I don't know. Right.
Well, I don't think there was as big a fuss made, believe it or not.
No, it didn't seem like it, at least not to me.
No.
But,
also, I don't think the royal family was in particularly good favor with the media at the time.
Well, plus you didn't have the Sex Pistols, and you didn't have the riots in was it Brixton? I think had riots in '77 as well, right before all that stuff was kicking off. You know, I think you guys had a kind of a heavy year that year.
Well, there is one, actually thinking about that, there is one purpose that the monarchy serves, which is kind of built in to British patriotism. And it's easier for the royal family or for the Queen to pull the country together than it is for anybody else in the land.
On that point, it was my personal opinion. I was one of those people. You might have been there that day as well, Brian, because I was at the march prior to the Iraq War. I think it was February 13th or 15th or something like that of 2003, right before, like a month before the war started. And there was about 2 million people in the street that day. And because there were so many more people than anyone ever saw or ever expected, we actually, for a minute there, we thought, hey, maybe this is going to make a difference, right? But the main slogan at that time was "Not in my name," right? If you're gonna, don't do this stuff in my name. You know what I mean? I don't want this. I don't choose this. This is supposed to be a democracy, and I'm telling you, I am not part of this. You know, that's the whole idea. And the one person who could have said "not in my name," who it would have really mattered, would have been the Queen.
Would have been the Queen.
Because it's the Queen's army, and even if the political arm said you better go and do this, I would be willing to bet you money that if the Queen said no, they wouldn't do it. So,
but there would have been political backlash for it.
Oh, it would have been a complete constitutional crisis that would have ended the monarchy.
Yeah,
but you wouldn't have gone to war. You know?
Well, here's the thing. You say we wouldn't have gone to war. The political crisis probably would have ended up, as you say, with the ending of the monarchy. And then Parliament would have just sent the troops off to war anyway.
Yeah, but maybe George Bush would have just been in too much of a hurry, and you guys wouldn't have been able to come along. You know.
Thing is, though, what you see on something like imprisoned or ship of Her Royal Majesty or something like that, that's just in her name only. It's not really her ships. It's not really her prisons. It's not really her armies. It's it belongs to the public, really.
Well, the oath of allegiance is actually aimed at her personally. So,
yes, of course.
Having taken that oath myself, had I been serving during that constitutional crisis, I would have been very, very torn.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think one of the reasons I never sought citizenship was because you have to pledge an oath to the Queen, and I'm like, the only person I'm ever going to pledge an oath to is my wife. That's it. No one else deserves that from me, really. You know what I mean?
It's only a formality.
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you a funny story about that. And when I got my last visa, which was I think in 2017, I was at the Home Office, and then one of the guards there, I told him the same story I just told you about how I don't want to swear an oath because of the Queen and blah blah blah. And he said he's a French guy, even though he was working in the British Embassy in Home Office, rather not the embassy, the Home Office. And this French guy says to me, he goes, "Oh, come, monsieur, surely you've told a lie on the sake of a woman once or twice in your life." I fucking lost my nut. I couldn't stop laughing. It was so, especially because he was French. It was too perfect.
Yeah, you gotta love the French.
Even
though we do have a historical hatred of them.
Yeah. What's that all about?
It's through all the wars that we had with them.
Yeah, and again, those stem back to Viking scuffles.
Well, you never know, right? Yep. I tend to think some of these arguments go back, like you just suggested, Brian, many centuries. Like just inside the UK, not even the UK, just inside England, right? You've got this northern accent, southern accent thing, which has serious prejudices behind it, which as a foreigner is extremely difficult to understand. And I mean, people really, I mean, good. I don't know anyone. I've never met a British person other than a Midlander who likes the Midland accent. Everyone else in the whole country hates the Birmingham accent, except people from Birmingham.
Birmingham?
I kind of hate my own accent.
There's nothing wrong with Birmingham.
Say again?
I said there's nothing wrong with Birmingham.
Birmingham. Yeah, and I don't know. I found the whole accent snobbery because I was living in the south of England, so I perceived it to be snobbery. You know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but they're just like they all sound thick in the north, and I'm like, no, they don't. You feel thick because you can't understand their accent. I mean, good grief, if you ever talk to a Geordie and you're not used to it,
yeah,
you have to ask them to repeat every other sentence.
I have
Well, I
to
mean,
have to admit, there's very few English accents that I can't actually understand.
Well, good. You've been
there's
around
like
the sun enough times.
I have
whole
been around a
mixture
bit.
of them.
I mean, Paul, we have
There is.
similar things here in the States, though. You know that. I mean, Southern accents are looked down upon by a lot of people in the country.
It
Yeah.
depends on.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing with our accents, though. After the Romans left, I mean, before the Romans and during the Romans, scattered tribes. Yeah. But after the Romans, we slowly consolidated into 7 kingdoms, I think it was, and sort of whittled down to
Sorry,
like 4 big ones for a few hundred years.
I think it may be 6 kingdoms. I think, not 7. I'm not entirely sure.
Well, you had Cornwall, you had Mercia, you had York.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Angles, East Anglia. That was, what the hell was that called? And you had Wessex.
That's 6 so far.
And Northumbria.
Yeah, there's your 7.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, man.
But anyway, that sort of whittled down to the big 4, which was Wessex, Mercia, and East Anglia and York, and it just, I mean, when you've got those sort of groupings for several hundred years, the sort of it kind of consolidates the various bigotries, and it wasn't until unification, which is only what, 500 or 600 years ago, maybe 7.
Think around that number, yeah.
Yeah, because we were still. Hang on, the French invaded, the Normans invaded in 1066.
Right,
We
and
were
then
united then. So yeah, about 1,000 years. We've only been United Kingdom for 1,000 years, and that's before you add Scotland,
is the
Wales, and
1066
Ireland.
thing, is that the root of the why the British hate the French? When I've asked people in Britain
One of them.
what's up with the the enmity between British and French people, most of my British friends will tell me that we don't hate them, they hate us. And I'm not so sure if that's true or not.
Well, I mean, there was
It's kind of mutual.
There was the Normans had invaded.
Yeah, that was
England.
1066.
But the Normans were Vikings, though. I mean, they were that whole area
They
of France
were.
was settled by the Vikings, so they were Vikings.
Yeah.
They were basically invading other Vikings.
But then so was Harold. Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I mean, that's all kind of screwed up right there. But whatever. But then there's the fact that French was the language of government, the language of royalty, in the UK, in England, in all of the kingdoms, and the commoners didn't speak it. So
well, if you look,
there was that.
if you look at it, I mean, there were huge chunks of France that were actually considered, English soil. Yeah, that's why you've still got the region Brittany today.
Yes.
Yep.
So I mean, it's always been kind of a clusterfuck. And I mean, and once English became a more accepted and language and not gutter trash, which is what it was for a very long time. Only poor people, only the poor spoke English. But once it became more standardized, and then you had more of a separation between the actual countries.
So, as interesting as all this is, and I'm sure it is, I want
okay, back to American topics.
Yeah, we're gonna grind on some American chaw here for a second, if that's all right. Because
okay, is Trump in prison yet?
No.
Not yet, no.
Oh crap. Okay.
Right. I just want to start off with what's going on in the states right now in terms of it's just not just a matter of voter suppression. There's a complete far right takeover going on states all across America right now, where they're literally going to try and basically our democracy is under assault on multiple fronts. Part of it's voter suppression, and part of it is they're just trying to change the laws to make it harder for everybody, basically. And it's just beyond voter suppression, and was what I'm trying to say. And I'm not exactly sure what can be done about it, because the powers that be just seem to be going, hey, there's this problem, and no one seems to be doing anything about it. Except for the Republicans, who are trying as hard as they can to change things before it's too late.
Yeah, before I go and make myself some tea, which I have to do, an observation that I'd like to throw in is, it seems, I know that it's disproportionately affecting people of color, because they do tend to be disproportionately poorer than as demographic as a whole. But looking at it with a larger lens, it does seem to be a corporate takeover that's pushing out those with no money, basically. It's basically trying to eradicate the voices of the poor. Yeah, to disenfranchise the poor, so that the only people that get a say in politics are the people with money to throw at politicians.
I actually disagree. I
Okay.
disagree with that take, because major corporations in the states that are some of the worst affected by these attempts at voter suppression, major corporations are actually kind of stepping up and saying, yeah, no, we're going to move our businesses, or we're not going to do business with your state, this, that, or whatever, if you follow through with this. So corporations are actually, yeah, they're at the forefront of trying to stop it.
Yes, I hear that argument, and yes, I'm aware of some of the people like Jeff Bezos and others that have spoken up and said, yeah, we're standing up against this. And they also seem to correlate also to the same corporations that say, yes, we agree with the tax rises. But here's the thing with that. When it comes to the tax, they are probably the biggest beneficiaries of the tax breaks. So who cares if the tax rate is going up if their bottom line is zero tax paid? So likewise, I'm guessing that there is some aspect of the voter suppression stuff, yeah, that they're against for corporate reasons rather than pure democracy reasons, if you get my drift. Yeah, there's got to be some actual benefit for them in doing this. That's my feeling.
So CRB Vegas says that corporations are going to save us. Laugh out loud.
Yeah, I agree with that laughter.
Yeah, I mean, but if number one, of course, you said that, and number two, yeah, I don't think anybody said that.
No.
So, I mean, it's kind of it's a straw man to begin with. So whatever. I try not to respond to straw mans.
All right, I'm going to go make some tea.
You'll see in a second. No,
don't leave me alone. Don't leave me alone. He's like the only Brit.
I won't be long.
He's like the only Brit on the show that knows about American politics, and I know very little.
Well, here's a learning opportunity for you, mate.
All right, I'll just mute my mic and keep my mouth shut then.
Oh, that's pretty funny. Well, all I know is that Vegas a moment ago said, doesn't exactly jibe with my ideas that we were already essentially a fascist state. Whether the state itself is fascist, I mean, my opinion was that Trump was authoritarian at least, and definitely had fascist tendencies. Whether that made him a fascist or not, history can judge. I'm not qualified. And I don't think enough time's gone by yet, because I honestly think these people aren't done. Not Trump, not the people under him, nobody.
Well, I mean, they're looking for bamboo.
Thing is, I was kind of pondering to myself, why was he putting his name in a hat in regards to the presidency anyway? I mean, before he was president, from what I hear, and this is just pure speculation, but I hear he was about to go bankrupt before he became president.
He's gone bankrupt about 6 times.
All right. Okay.
His casinos went bankrupt like 5 or 6 times, but Trump himself didn't go bankrupt, although he did lose $900 million over the space of 10 years.
Yikes.
And if you can afford to lose $900
and I also heard he scammed a charity one time.
Well, here's the thing. You can't really lose $900 million, and they're going over those tax records with a fine-tooth comb, and eventually they will hopefully before it's too late, nail his ass to the wall about that stuff, because you can fuck with just about everybody but the IRS. Right.
If they can get to Capone, they can get to Trump.
Let's hope so. But no, aside from that though, I mean, like, Rob, what do you think is worse, Trump or Trumpism?
I think the idea of Trumpism is worse than Trump because Trump. I don't think Trump, during his presidency, had all of his faculties. I just think he was just
Trump. Trump has never had all of his faculties. Never.
Well, that's true. That's true. But yeah.
So Trump I mean, Trumpism is worse, and the reason is Trump is a person, and people are fallible, and they die, but Trumpism is an idea, and ideas don't die.
Well, here's the thing, but ideas can be morphed into all sorts of different things and manipulated by various different peoples for their own purposes. And what I find most disturbing about this whole idea of Trumpism is you got people like Ted Cruz and DeSantis and others who are trying to out-Trump Trump, and just in terms of their overall, I'm just going to say abrasive, awful bullshit, and hope it gets me clicks because that's how I get funding.
Yeah, I mean, to both of your points, it's kind of what Republicans did with Reaganism. If you look at what I didn't like Reagan. I think it was horrible. But if you look at what Reagan stood for versus what Republicans even 5 years ago stood for, there's a huge disconnect. But they basically, it's kind of like what they do with evangelicals do with Jesus. They basically morph whatever bullshit they want to believe and try to make the rest of us believe that it has anything to do with Jesus, and it's the same thing. I mean, Ronald Reagan gave amnesty to the undocumented immigrants. Can you imagine any what they would do with anybody? Certainly if a Democrat tried to do that today, there'd be another insurrection.
To that point, real quick, Joe, to that point, I mean, when Reagan was president, there was around about an average of 100,000 immigrants a month coming over, sometimes lots more than that. Yeah. It's nowhere near that now, not even close. I'm not even sure if we get that many in a year at the moment, and yet there's somehow a crisis at the border. I mean,
because they need to gin up the anger and ire in their base that we're getting overrun by illegals and the president's not doing anything about it. Blah 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 blah. The irony is during Trump's term, because he's stupid and so his followers are even more stupid. They were actually while ICE was running around grabbing people, but on the border they were actually capturing fewer people. Why? Because in Trump's addled brain, that looks worse. So it's better to pretend that to act like there's a crisis and then not actually gather the people as many. So the numbers, the number of people we caught went way down. Because making it seem as if fewer people were coming, but there weren't fewer people coming. They were just grabbing fewer people, and then they were treating the people they were grabbing worse.
It's something else about Reagan too. I mean, Reagan sat down with the Afghan Mujahideen. That's they were the guerrilla fighters in Afghanistan that eventually gave rise to the Taliban. He had them at the White House. So it's just and they made him out to be a god. If a president did that of any party today, forget about it.
I'm not so sure. I mean, Trump was cozying up to Kim Jong-un and other dictators, and Reagan was pretty cozy with Ferdinand Marcos, as I recall.
was strategy. He was strategizing. That's what he was doing.
Well, as I always recall, like, because it was always couched into the thing. Well, we got to fight the Soviets and the Warsaw Pact, and so sometimes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And sometimes you got to consort with shady customers in order for the greater good, kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember all that.
Here's the thing: the enemy of my enemy, decades later, became our enemy.
Yep. Although what's ironic to me is that when Bin Laden decided he was going to attack America, it was basically two events. One of which was during the in 91 when the Gulf War was about to cook off. Bin Laden offered his group's services to come help out, and he was rejected. So he had kind of a bug up his ass about that. And then, based on what happened in Mogadishu, then and the fact that basically we left when because we got a bloody nose and we left. He basically got convinced that we were ripe for to attack and that we would be cowed. And the thing is like I don't think he studied history properly. But here's the sad part is ultimately I think Bin Laden won. Because if you look at what the country is now versus what the country was pre 9/11, I think we are, as a people, we're much worse off than we used to be.
Yeah, I want to address on that Tommy said. Most people are against voter ID cards, but have no problem having to show a vaccine
card. A lot
card.
more people are.
All right. Yeah, I was about to address what he said. So hang on a sec, Soprano. So yeah, here's the thing. If you're going to give government-issued voter ID cards to people and you're just going to give them, I don't think many people have an issue with that. What they have an issue with is being forced to pay for an ID in order to vote. That would equal a poll tax, which is against the law. It's unconstitutional. So either you give them the ID, just give it to them, or you don't have it. And the vaccine cards, a showing of a vaccine card, that saves lives. So, okay. Anyway,
yeah, I was just pointing out that it's apples and oranges. Those two.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's the thing. I'll show my vaccination card because I want to make sure wherever I'm going that the other motherfuckers are vaccinated too. So it would be wrong of me to expect other people to pony that up if I'm not going to do it myself. But I don't want to go like, for instance, a cruise ship. I don't want to be on a boat. I mean, a cruise ship's a fucking petri dish. Wouldn't want to be on a cruise ship unless I knew that every single person, including the crew and all the staff, everybody there was vaccinated. And we still need to follow, protocols because the vaccine protects me, but the mask protects you. Which is something I keep trying to explain to people who either can't, won't, or understand that for one reason or another. So yeah, and actually, so what's happening in Florida? This is what gets me. The right wing always tries to pretend they're the party of freedom, but they're literally telling businesses that they can't have a vaccine passport, and that's why the cruise liners are all planning on boycotting Florida because. And then I have some people trying to make excuses for this, saying, "Oh, well, companies don't want to have to do that." I'm like, there wasn't a mandate for companies to have it. They're saying companies can't do it. Well, where's the freedom in that?
Where indeed, if you're forced not to do something, it's not morally different than being forced to do something. Because I feel the same way about when. People like, for example, in France, they've been debating about whether they can force girls not to wear hijabs in school who would normally wear hijabs. And my whole feeling on hijabs is if a woman or a girl chooses to wear it of her own accord, then there's no problem. And if she doesn't want to wear it, then there's no problem. And if a country enforces you to wear it, and you don't want to, that's the problem. And if a country says you can't wear it and you want to, that's a problem.
I mean, there's an argument that it's basically like a symbol of subjugation, or that they're being abused by being forced to wear it by their religion. But that's a whole different conversation than whether or not the state can force them to not wear it. I mean, that's a completely different discussion.
Exactly.
See, my religion means that I need to wear my budgie smugglers out in public. But in this country, that crosses obscenity laws. So help me out, guys.
Obscenity laws.
I don't know exactly. Well, yeah, I'm against obscenity laws generally speaking too. So, but I'm assuming budgie smuggler is like a really, really tight pair of shorts.
Bungee smugglers is Australian slang for those really tight briefs that you can see everything in. It leaves nothing to the imagination.
The banana hammock, we call it here.
I suppose that's a good analog. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I think that banning those outright. I mean, it's one thing if you say, okay, we're going to limit you to certain beaches or whatever. I guess that probably wouldn't be too bad. But to actually ban it outright, I don't think the state should be able to do that. I don't. Just like in New York State, women fought and got the right to be topless outside because they made the argument that we're getting treated differently. Men can go outside topless, and there's no law against it. But you could be, if you're a woman, and at first it was like in the subway because they were like, well, what if I'm feeding my baby? And then they're like, well, there's really no reason in general to stop me from being topless. So it's legal in New York, and it's legal in most places in New Jersey too, unless alcohol is being served. So that's a whole other thing.
When Pride rolls around, I'll be walking around the streets in Manhattan topless. I mean, I do that a lot, but this year is kind of different.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. This year's kind of different.
Sorry, I just need to interrupt. I've seen a comment from Tommy that I need to address. He says, well, you're going to be forced on how much food you can buy. I'm assuming that that's a reference to the Biden's going to cut your meat consumption by 90%, so you're only going to have 4 burgers a year. Tommy, that thing originated in the Daily Mail.
Right.
And it's not even, I mean, the Daily Mail makes crappy toilet paper.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the Daily Mail to line my bird's cage. I mean, it's pretty bad.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I stepped on my thing again, so I wasn't sure if I was muted because there's no light.
I hate when I step on my thing. So the thing is, this is what gets me about the right wing, though, is they will believe literally. I know Tommy's just just trolling, but the right wing believes literally every bullshit thing that comes out. They make no effort to verify it. As long as they hear it and it's bad for the other side they don't like, they believe it.
Well, even if it's verifiable.
Marsha Blackburn. Isn't that her name? Marsha Blackburn, the Republican Congresswoman. She went on TV and said the Bidens want to force you to go to school for 2 extra years, whether you like it or not. And it was just like, and people believed it. She actually, her team had to put out a statement saying that it wasn't true. But yeah.
There is a very, very good rule of thumb, which I'm going to give everybody in the audience and you guys for free. It's a fact of human nature. People, if the narrative is right, you can make people believe absolutely anything. And you've got 2 routes. Yeah, you can either convince them that it's something they want to be true or something they fear might be true. And if you can hit either of those buttons, you've got them, regardless of what it is.
That's why they were very willing to believe that Hillary Clinton was running a pedophile ring in the basement of a building that had no basement, because they wanted to believe horrible shit about her.
Well, yeah.
Or they feared it was true about their leaders.
I think there's a whole psychology behind the whole Q phenomenon, which I don't really want to necessarily go down that rabbit hole right this second. But the fact that people are willing to believe such, I mean, it's not far off lizard people, if you ask me, which we were laughing about with Wayne last week. But where all this is going, they're completely untethered to the truth, because it's not just things like the QAnon conspiracies and the things you were just mentioning a moment ago. It's also the fact that like a whole bunch, like dozens of Republicans are telling their constituency, hey, there's these great benefits available for you in the American Rescue Package and blah, blah, blah. And not a single one of them voted for it.
Yeah.
So they're taking credit for something that everyone likes and they know is good, and they didn't even vote for it. And
it goes even worse, Paul. I forget what state was doing it, but I think there's more than one state where they're actually voting in that state. Oh, I remember it was for the unemployment benefits, that they're literally rejecting the unemployment benefit in that state. So, and even though it's that it's 100% funded by the feds, they're rejecting the money. And of course, the talking point is that, well, people are getting so much money on unemployment that they're not going back to work.
Right, which is easily refutable.
Right, which even if that's true, that's just because people are getting paid so poorly.
Right. Yeah, and quite honestly, if anything that drives up wages from the bottom anyway is a good thing in my opinion, whether that's legislation or whether it's just pressure on the market because the labor market is such where it's actually a laborer's market right now, and they can go, you know what? No, I'm not working for $8 an hour or whatever, I mean, the fact is, and this situation, this to me is what demonstrates how absurd the current minimum wage is. I think that the national minimum wage, and in lots of localities it's higher, I grant you that, but the national minimum wage I think is $7.25 an hour.
Yeah.
And in almost any city in America, there's no doubt that you can beg more money than that. You can almost certainly stand on a street corner and get more than $7.25 every hour. Well, so and why would anyone work?
And to your point, Paul, I mean, here's one thing that I found that was upsetting and infuriating at the same time. So I told you guys the last couple of weeks I've been helping Odie get settled. For anyone who doesn't know Odie, that's Divinity 33372. So she's in Philadelphia now. When she was trying to find an apartment, and one apartment we looked at, it was like $800 a month, which is not unusual. That's especially in a city, that's actually a pretty good rent. Through most of the agencies, they're requiring that you had that you could prove that your income was 3 times the rent, because that's the typical thing. It shouldn't be more than 1/3 your income, right? So when you do the math out, that's $2,400 a month. Well, I worked that out. That's $15 an hour. So if you don't make $15 an hour in Philadelphia, you don't qualify to get rent on an apartment that's $800, which again is very typical rent for a studio or a small one bedroom. So that goes you right there. That's why it needs to be $15 an hour, because if you live anywhere and you work, you should be able to afford a basic apartment.
Precisely.
And if you don't qualify, clearly something's fucking wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got the similar story across so many sectors where people have to hold down more than one job, just in order to make the basic rent and other bills, and to keep food on the table. And the reason for that is because one job, there's no way they would be able to make just the bare minimum they need to get those essentials paid.
Right. You're muted.
Sorry.
Yeah, you need to unmute, Paul.
Oops.
Sorry. Guys. I need to go because it's
right.
getting rather late. Thanks for having me. And sorry, I haven't really contributed much here.
Surprise! Thanks for coming. I'm glad you're in. I think this is the first time I've ever heard your real voice.
Yeah, sorry. I am British, so it's like I'm glad you're here.
Spoken like a true Brit.
I was going to say spoken like a true Canadian, but there you go.
What? Wait a minute. Do I come off as a Canadian?
No, that was
you said you were sorry. You said you were sorry.
That's a Canadian trait.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being sorry for everything is a Canadian trait, I believe, these days.
That's kind of funny.
I may come back next week.
All right.
It depends on my sleep pattern. Okay, so thanks so much for having me.
Take care, man.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Ciao. So where was I? I can't even remember now.
You were trying to speak and you were muted.
Yeah, but I was going to say, so no, you guys don't even know where I was. Oh, you can trust me. It was going to be really good. Anyway.
Well, it was probably based on what Brian was talking about being able to afford basic things.
Yeah, and how people need to hold down 2 jobs just to get the basic necessities
And if you're
paid.
holding down multiple jobs, you are being exploited. And I was going to say, Brian, the same problem exists in the UK, but in a slightly different way than it exists in America, because the problem, in my opinion, this is only worth one man's opinion. It's not a fact. But the problem is that there's been a decimation of the union movement over successive decades to the point where the workers don't have any real voice. And there's an anti-union movement in America where the people working for companies like Amazon and Walmart and stuff are being discouraged, actively persuaded not to be in unions, intimidated possibly even. But I mean, like, take 8 or 10 years ago when my son was trying to get a job when he was 20 years old. He wanted to get a job at Tesco's, right? And he got a job at Tesco and he was on what they call a 0 hours contract. Now, if you don't know what that means that you have to be available for work for 40 hours a week, but they're only obligated to give you 0 hours a week, but you need to be available for 40. So they might have you working for any number of hours. In America, it's slightly different. There's tax incentives for not employing someone for a full 40 hours a week. So if you're employing someone for 30 hours a week, then there's a whole bunch of benefits you don't have to give them, right? So here's the thing. There's a lot of jobs, there's a lot of income levels in America where you can't get a 40-hour-a-week job because those require more experience or education or whatever. So you end up having to get 2 or 3 30-hour-a-week jobs because 40-hour-a-week jobs just don't exist. And
it goes even further, because I have this issue with one of my employees who works part-time, and he can't commit to 40 hours because he's got health issues. His wife has health issues. If someone doesn't average at least 24 hours a week, you can't give them benefits.
Right. So and these laws, where do they come from? They were written by lobbyists, 25, 35 years ago,
Yeah.
And
well, the thing with unions here, there are certain sectors of industry where unions do still have some sway. A lot of those tend to be council and white collar related. Yeah, and what's happened with the majority of the workforce is, yes, we've got these 0 contract hours, 0 hour contracts, but we've also got this huge surge in agency supplied work.
Right.
And that has killed our workforce.
Yeah.
Because you've got the 0 hour contract, plus you are being paid minimum wage, and the agency is being paid more than you are.
I know that. Yeah, I used to have that when I worked in construction. It's a real problem.
Well, yeah. And to what you were saying, Brian, also now in the U.S., what you're calling council jobs here, we would call public sector unions. So people who work
public sector, yes,
work for the government in various roles. And yeah, that's really the only union, that and the teachers union. And of course, what do the Republicans attack more than anything? Public sector unions and the teachers union.
I want to address something in the comments. Q says, don't these idiots realize that if we made the federal minimum wage $15, that the price of everything would skyrocket and unemployment would go up? There's ways around that, and I'm just going to elucidate my own opinion. if you first made a law that said that minimum wage had to go up with inflation, and you made that law first, and then you raised the minimum wage to $15, it couldn't make inflation worse, because if companies tried to raise their prices to compensate for the wages would have to go up in line with those prices anyway. So there wouldn't be any incentive to raise the prices, because you're going to raising prices equals raising wages. Carry on.
Mine is just a very quick point, and it's more of a one man's observation. When it comes to the general prices of everything over there in the States, it's not just the exchange rates, but when I came over to visit, everything was so cheap there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, paying more for things, to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't say that you're actually paying the true value of things anyway. You're getting most things cheaper than you probably should anyway.
Yeah. Well, and there's another thing and there's a reason for that, because it's hidden economy. So all the people, there are people, lots of people, basically everyone who makes the minimum wage, or actually pretty much everyone who makes less than $15 an hour, just about, most of them qualify for federal benefits. So what ends up happening is you are paying more, but you're not paying it at the point of distribution. You're paying it in benefits, for people who need them, because they need food stamps, or they need some other supplemental income. So it's the same thing at the restaurant. I've said this before. When I was a kid, the typical tip for a tipped worker was 10%. Now it's 20%. And some people have said to me, "Oh, well, things have gone up." But yeah, but remember, it's percent. So if it should be the same percent, the reason why it's not is because at the same time that everything else went up, the tipped wage worker wage did not go up. So the reason why we have to pay more is because we have to make up the difference. So
some states, they don't even make minimum wage when they work those jobs.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it's $2.13 an hour is the federal tipped worker wage. $2.13 an hour. Try to do anything on that. You can't stand in a fucking closet at $2.13 an hour. So let me finish, Rob. So what ends up happening is you are paying more for the food, like for instance at a restaurant. You just don't know it. It's not on the bill. It's in the tip, and that's why if you don't tip the people who when you go out, you're a complete asshole, because that person's making almost nothing. And so you're basically, what you're doing is when you pay a tip, you're subsidizing the owner of that restaurant, so they don't have to raise the price. So it's hidden. It's hidden. Same thing with Walmart. Walmart with their low prices. Most of Walmart's workers qualify for fucking food stamps. So what ends up happening is we through your taxes, you are subsidizing Walmart's workforce, so that Walmart gets to have a cheaper price on the sticker. I mean, meanwhile, you're paying all that extra money, and you're fucking over local mom and pop businesses. So don't give me this bullshit that it's going to raise prices, because it's not. Every time when we have done the studies in this, every time the minimum wage goes up, you get a brief increase in inflation, and then it rolls back to where it was. And I'm telling you this as a business owner, and as of this week, the last employee that I had that was making less than $15 an hour now makes $15. So every one of my fucking employees makes somewhere between $15 and $85 an hour. So don't tell me that everything's going to go up, because that's bullshit.
So, you're not subsidizing actually the Walmart employees. You're actually subsidizing the Walton family, one of the richest families on the planet. So there's that. And number two, there are places in the U.S. where the minimum wage is already $15 an hour, and the sky didn't fall.
Yeah, prices didn't go up.
There's also a distinction, which what you were saying, Joe, highlights that I noticed, and that is the pricing disparity between somewhere like a drive-through McDonald's or Whataburger or somewhere, and a walk-in, sit-down restaurant. Yeah, $10 burger sounds average, but then, as you say, on top of that, you've got to then calculate taxes, and then you've got to calculate your tip. Yeah. And this is something, again, here, tipping, you can if you want to, but you don't need to because the employer is paying them for their time. Like, they would if they were in an office.
Okay, so Q says, blah, 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 blah. We can be real commies then. So, okay, so let me ask you a question. What about going to work every day and punching the clock, working 40 hours a week, and then collecting at the end of your week that you worked all week, collecting a hard-earned paycheck that is a fair value for the labor you put in? What about that says communism to you? I please explain that, because yeah.
Yeah, in communism, you work 40-hour week just to secure your place in the bread queue.
Yeah. And quite frankly, again, as I always love when people try to throw the socialist or capitalist at me. No, motherfucker, I'm a capitalist. I'm a practitioner of capitalism. How many companies do you have?
That's pretty funny. Yeah. I don't know. Communism is, most people, most young people, most millennials don't have a clue. Don't have a clue because they didn't live through the Cold War and they didn't see. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when people would get shot trying to swim across the Danube to get out of Hungary or whatever, because people don't comprehend the fact that these communist countries were closed to the outside world, and you were told what to do. If they needed factory workers in your area and you didn't want to be a factory worker, that's tough. You work in the factory and you got paid the same as everybody else because that's part of the whole communist philosophy. There's like a couple of tiers of incomes, but I mean, things were so fucking bleak for communism. Of course it was going to fail because it's contrary to human nature. You can't accomplish communism on anything other than perhaps a local level,
Communism, like capitalism, works on paper. It runs into problems as soon as you start throwing human beings into the mix because you have greed, you have power plays, you have all this other shit going on. But on paper,
what the system is.
Yeah, on paper, they're perfect systems, but you don't factor the human element into it.
And then socialism is a whole nother animal that's got like a million different shades.
Right. Yeah.
It's like somebody says they're a socialist.
It's not communism.
Like, yeah.
No.
Right. And if somebody
not.
says that they're a socialist, or somebody calls someone a socialist, it's just like, okay, you need to be more specific because that could mean a lot of things. I mean, what are you, Bernie Sanders, or are you Venezuela? I mean, let's talk about this here because there's a huge gulf between those two things.
Speaking of socialist and pertaining to what we were talking about a moment ago, we're talking about unions. I mean, I'm reminded of a conversation I had because for whatever reason, back in the day, my Got That Funk channel had a lot of Swedish fans. And one time in a video, I asked my Swedish fans, so what is it about Sweden, right? Because everybody there seems to be like relatively prospering all right. And so what did you guys do differently over there other than have high taxes by comparison to Americans? And one of the many things I found out was that Sweden never had a Reagan or a Thatcher. So they never had a union busting era. So unions are super strong in Sweden, right? And Sweden does not have a national minimum wage, but everybody makes good money in Sweden, even people at the lower end of the economic spectrum. And the gap between the richest and the poorest is like 10 times smaller than what it is in America. There
you go. You see, Scandinavia, Vikings again. We're back to the Vikings again.
Well, first off, Quinca, is that generally speaking, whenever the minimum wage goes up, it doesn't happen overnight. So, and yet another straw man. It always gets phased in over a few years. The same thing happened now out in Washington State, Seattle area when they raised it. It didn't flip overnight. It happened over a period of time.
Yeah, and just
so property. Yeah, no one works for him makes less than $25 an
Yeah, the last company I worked for, none of us worked for less than 24K a year.
Yeah, none of my full-time hourly people make less than 27.
So yeah, when I had the restaurant, I mean, nobody that worked for me made under $10 an hour, and in food service, that's actually pretty good to start at.
And basically the people that I have that make between 15 and 25, one does data entry for like a few hours a week, part-time, and then the others are interns. Because that's the other thing too, when people say about interns, why engineering interns? So engineering interns get paid between $15 and $20 an hour, depending on what year they're in.
Oh, so you do pay your interns?
Yes.
Okay, because one of the problems I have with internships generally is, what a wonderful source of unpaid labor that is. Certainly the way that it works here.
Yeah. See, the thing is, having been in engineering. Well, I was considering engineering co-op. Co-ops always get paid at least something. But actually, when I was doing it back, and we're talking like late 80s, early 90s, I got $10 an hour, which if you just for inflation is like $20.
Yeah. See, what you're describing to me sounds more like an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Suja Landren makes the point that America's printed so much money lately that $15 now would not be the same as $15 last year. Whilst both those points are true, because inflation has been going for 40 years or 50 years,
Yeah,
So-
but I don't think there's. I mean, because of the pandemic, there is an increase in printing of money to beef up reserves at the banks, so they're more willing to lend money, which actually ends up being a good thing because it allows businesses to survive and stuff. But I don't think there's a massive glut of new money pouring into the system. A lot of the money that the government is spending and talking about spending is all recycled from taxes.
Right. Plus the fact that here, once again, another straw man. In New Hampshire, they don't have a $25 minimum wage. No one here is arguing for a $25 minimum wage. So once again, you're a liar.
Hi there, Huck, by the way. The thing with the global economies now being based on the dollar rather than gold reserves, I'm not really sure how that would affect inflation rates, because one of the reasons why inflation ran rampant in Germany and other places was because you had more notes covering the same amount of gold. So I'm not sure how printing money affects inflation these days.
Well, I mean, it has some effect, but nowhere near as much effect as it used to.
Because when you've got a finite amount of gold,
sure.
that's really going to
restrict.
restrict.
By definition, the money's becoming worth less unless people are also making it. You have the earnings have to be commensurate with the inflation for it not to be worth less.
Right.
But there we've seen a disparity between the inflation rates and the rates at which wages have risen.
Well, and again, the bullshit part of this whole that's going to create inflation is it's still the same amount of money in the fucking economy. The difference is who has it. So whether you concentrate all the money in a small number of people or it gets spread out. And here's the thing. Capitalism, market economy requires, for the engines that make it work, requires the constant flow of money from person to person, value-added service from person to person. So if the money gets concentrated in a small number of people, that's actually bad for capitalism. You may know about surreal numbers, but you know dick about the economy.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the things that these stimulus checks that you've been getting has done is it's put money into the hands of people and they have gone out and spent it, thus generating the wheels of the economy.
Why would I come to New Hampshire? I live in New Jersey. It's fucking way better than fucking New Hampshire. And you know what? The per capita income in New Jersey is higher than the per capita income in New Hampshire. We just
Talking of gold,
we just don't have quite as many guns because in New Jersey there's lots of people because a lot of people want to be here, unlike New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So, so as
the
a
densest,
result,
yeah, New Jersey has the densest population, people per square mile, than any other state. So,
including California.
Yeah, by far.
Yeah,
California's a big state, but
including California freeways.
Oh no. I don't know. Yeah, the Parkway here is pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Plus the fact that if you consider that the southern half of the state has less than a third of the population, so in the north part of the state, it's actually even more densely populated. Actually,
most of California, Brian, is empty. I mean, there's population concentrations in the south around San Diego and Los Angeles, and then you got San Jose, Sacramento, and San Francisco, and then in the north, it's pretty sparse. And in the middle, in between, you've got like Fresno and Bakersfield, but that's almost embarrassing to admit.
Yeah, but apart from the sort of the New England, the original sort of 13 colonies area. Isn't that the blueprint for most of the states? It's like you've got concentrated city, and then you've got an interstate connecting it with the next concentrated city, and so on. I mean, that's kind of the American blueprint, isn't it?
Well, see, the thing is, like, if you go down the East Coast at night, you can really see it. There's Mega City, which radiates out from New York City, covers the northern half of New Jersey, all the way down to Philadelphia, all the way up to Boston.
I mean, it's something that they're seeing all over the world, though. I mean, these have evolved into mega cities. Almost the entire state of New Jersey is New York City, and New York City and Washington D.C. almost blend together. It's actually kind of interesting when you look at it at night from space, and you can see how the mega cities just kind of.
Oh yeah. Now the interesting thing is, once you get past D.C., then I can always tell where I am because I can count cities because there's a city and a whole bunch of nothing, and it's another city and a whole bunch of nothing. So I can tell. Oh, I'm in North Carolina. Oh, we crossed into South Carolina. Now we're in Georgia. Now we're in Florida.
So
you count cities the way that we count train stations.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But I mean, they're changing though. They're evolving beyond that. But that's the way it was for a long time. Yeah. It's true.
So I always laugh when I talk to somebody who was from a small village or a small town, and they're like, "Oh, that their town had just say 4,000 or 5,000 people." I'm like, "We had 2 high schools in my town, and collectively they were more than that."
I wanted to address. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say quickly, at the town where I grew up, they had a head count of 2,000 people when I was growing up there. It's now got a head count of 20,000. Yeah. It's insane.
I wanted to quickly say something about Vegas saying about inflation and hyperinflation, and he said housing and stocks. And there's a couple of things about that. It is the stock market has been artificially inflated for a while now.
So is the housing.
Well, and the housing right now, I mean, it's booming right now because home sales are through the roof, and home values, I mean, have gone up so quickly. Such a short period of time. Like I can, sell my house for a lot more than what we paid for it if I wanted to. I just don't know where we're going to go if we do that. But I mean, so that's good. That's because of the pandemic, and that eventually is going to stop, and it's going to be a bad time for some people. But like the stocks, it's been years now. I mean, that Trump, it's been artificially inflated for at least 2 or 3 years.
Oh,
from my perspective, From my perspective, there's been the same thing in the housing market as well. 25 years ago, when I was a property owner, when I sold that property, if I still owned it, it would now be worth 10 times what I got for it.
Well, we had the crash in 2008, which that the housing market the bottom just kind of fell out, it was a pretty slow recovery. It was a really slow recovery until recently, and recently it's just because of the pandemic. It's just like it's on jet fuel.
I mean, the thing is that, like you said, those weren't. The other part of the problem too is because remember because we were not buying a lot of things for several months, demand went down, and a lot of companies furloughed employees. Now people are, everyone's starting because they have money. Thanks, partly because things are opening up, and partly because of the stimulus. So people have money to spend. So we actually have like a worldwide chip shortage right now because a lot of those companies that make chips in the Far East had backed down production, and now they're having a hard time getting people back to make more chips. So
I'd just like to ask.
The upside is going to be is that wages are going to go up regardless because they're going to have to, because it's going to be the only way to get people to go back to to come in and work.
That's what I was saying before. I think the pressure on wages is just naturally going to go up, and that's almost better than doing it by legislation, because that means when they decide to legislate the rest of the way, it'll be a bit easier to do.
Yeah, there's another thing that you've got to factor into what's driving inflation, and that's the insistence for corporations, mega corporations in particular, to have an increased profit margin year on year. And the only way that can actually be reflected down the market, down the chain, as it were, is increased prices for things.
Yeah. Well, one other thing too, as far as the potential for inflation, which really isn't there. So I just looked it up. The number of workers who make less than $15 an hour right now is 39 million people. So we're about 13% of the population. So we're not talking, like a huge swath of the population is going to suddenly make more. Plus the fact that what will happen is that they will spend that money. And yeah, like I said, you'll see a short-term bump in inflation because we always do. And then it'll go away because it always does. And that's historic. I really wish I could find. I had found it years ago. I looked for it, and it was a chart that showed inflation, and you could see whenever the minimum wage went up, it would go up for a little bit, and then within about 6 to 9 months, it would fall away, because the system would adjust to the new wages. But and again, it's the same amount of money in the economy. It's just that when the people at the top will get a smaller percentage of it. Yeah. And you know what? And that's not going to hurt things. Actually will help, because again, the people at the top that have stashed away millions and billions, they can't spend or even invest all that money.
Yeah, so it's effectively out of circulation and doing absolutely bugger all for the economy.
Right.
Yeah. Something about what I see. Something about people who are working from home. Like a lot of people suffered through the pandemic. Obviously there was a lot of like jobs that were lost, and they're slowly coming back. And pretty soon I think they're going to start coming back quickly. But yeah, some did all right. We did okay. Actually, because of a lot of financial decisions that were made on the federal level, we actually did really well through the pandemic, through quarantine. Peach was able to work from home. We got the stimuluses. We saved money on gas because not driving. It ended up, we did well. It ended up being a good thing for us, but that's not everybody. A lot of people suffered.
Yeah, a lot of people are homeless and about to become homeless because of the judge's decision last week, which I know they're appealing. He overturned the eviction moratorium, and that's pretty dire because, don't get me wrong. I think if you're a landlord, you've got a right to expect your rent. But on the other hand, if people can't work because of the pandemic, I think they had to do the moratorium for at least some period of time.
Yeah,
I honestly, I just don't think that's what do you guys think? Was the judge's decision correct? Is it unconstitutional to say, hey, you don't have to pay your rent?
I don't know.
I think so. I hate to say it, but I think so. Because basically, if you're a landlord, you're running a business. It's what it is,
Right.
You're getting paid for the use of that space. That is your business. And basically, if somebody isn't going to pay you, and the government says, then you can't throw them out because of the pandemic, they've now prevented you from operating your business. Um,
Here's the
it's
thing, though. We already regulate evictions, even before the pandemic.
Do you have
right.
do you have do you, I suppose it varies from state to state, but I would imagine that most states would have some system whereby the renter can get some sort of assistance if they have no money.
I mean, it's state to state. There's going to be different rules and different laws and everything
Yeah,
else about that.
obviously, but
Different
there's
regulations. But I mean, I think in some places, yeah, they have that kind of a thing. And plus, you're
yeah.
protected
So
as a renter. Like I know in New Jersey, there's a pretty strict renter's bill of rights. Basically, like there are certain things as a renter that you're entitled to. And one is they have to give you a certain amount of time to either catch up or to for a final determination to be made that you have to go. And even then, you have a certain amount of time from the time that determination is made until you have to go out, get out. And if you take them to court, you can even get more time out of it than that. So there's like all kinds of stuff that you can use to protect yourself as a renter. And there should
Yeah.
also be renters insurance, I think, that might be able to pay to help with maybe like a missed month or two, possibly, depending on your policy. There's all kinds of stuff you can do.
or
And there's also, it depends on where you are and how much money you have. I mean, if you're low income, the lower your income, the more in the crosshairs you are, and it's
Because you
harder.
yeah,
probably can't
but I mean,
afford the lawyer.
this is probably going to sound overly socialist of me, but surely it's worth raising taxes by a couple of cents on the dollar if you can guarantee people a safety net so that if they literally cannot pay their rent, then they can get that rent covered by some form of welfare.
So okay,
Don't do
so
it. Don't
I
do
want to
it.
address this. I want to address this a couple of things. One is the answer is space colonies, of course. Love it. And
Huh?
also
You're going to have to explain that one to me.
I have no idea. Ashtray said it. Colonies. I like it. So Q is saying about the purpose of unemployment is kind of addresses, I think, a little bit what you were saying about the government. Can't they do certain things, right? Well, I mean, if you are having a hard time paying your rent because you lost your job, people are going to be like, well, what about unemployment? Well, unemployment only pays a small percentage of pretty much what you're making anyway. It's not going to be enough to pay your rent. So if you're on unemployment and you got to rent, you're rude. Unemployment isn't going to cover. So I think personally, I think during this time, the government should be paying a percentage of people's rent to keep them in house. Just
Well, and
a disaster.
well, here's the other thing, though, what a lot of people don't realize. There was back when the stimulus happened last year. There was, as part of the whole big package, there was actually relief for landlords. So unfortunately, my company, we found out about it too late to really benefit by it. But they were basically covering, like the landlord. You basically, if you said to your landlord, at least for commercial property, if you said, hey, look, we can't afford to pay this bill because we're not, customers aren't buying our services, we're not getting any revenue. They were basically, then the government was basically covering the rent. So what there's to do is the landlord would have to basically apply and say, okay, I've got so many renters, they can't afford to pay their rent. Here's the amount I'm losing, and that got covered. So like we ended up, by the time we found out about it, it was kind of too late. I think we got like a half a month off, I think. And so my landlord didn't lose that money. They got reimbursed by the federal government. So there was a program to do that. Maybe that wasn't big enough. I don't know, but there were some ways to do it.
So have a government program that says, in order to protect people from being evicted because of something that's happened on a global scale, a global emergency, and through of their own become homeless. So in order to protect them, we were going to implement this program. Does not equal printing more money. I don't understand why you keep saying that. It's like you don't understand how money works. You don't understand how economies work. If the government spends money, it doesn't mean they printed it. So just say.
I mean,
I'd just like to
inflation
push
occurs
back.
when the money supply goes up faster than GDP goes up. I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
it will happen.
I just
It's baked into the way we do our economy now, as I said the other couple of weeks ago. Because now, like if you buy things on credit, you're increasing the money supply just automatically. You're spending more money than you actually possess. So
I just like to push back against Raven's homeless insurance idea. There seems to be in most insurance policies a little clause that indemnifies against having to pay out against acts of God, and a pandemic would probably fall into that definition. So, I don't know.
The fine print is always a bitch.
yeah, right.
Yeah, but that seems that there just pulls the rug from that idea and makes just raising taxes a cent or two to just provide that safety net. And here's, if it helps, rather than seeing taxes as a theft, it might help to change the paradigm so that you're seeing it as an investment in your own future should you not be able to perform to the same standard as you are today.
Bill Clinton used to use the word investment all the time when it came to spending on with taxation, and I think it's a wise tack. But unfortunately, Bill Clinton started it. So even though I think it is no, seriously, I think it has been tainted thus, despite the fact that it is not only technically true. But as you say, it's good marketing strategy as well, because anything that you do for the infrastructure is an investment.
Well, the thing is, I don't think it's tainted. It's just that the Republicans will basically do anything that any Democrat did and try to make it a bad thing. But as far as the oil reserves, tapping into Alaska, again, you don't understand the economy. There's no shortage of oil right now, so releasing a lot more oil is going to drive the price of oil down. The reason why we're holding on to the oil in Alaska, and mind you, we are drilling in Alaska. There's the whole Alaskan pipeline. You ever heard of it? But as far as the stuff in Alaska, we're not touching that because whether we're at peak oil or not, we're fairly close to it. This is the reason why we keep drilling further and further out, and we keep having accidents in the ocean because the easy oil on land is largely gone.
Right. As someone who lived in Alaska for 2 years, I would scream if they drill off the north coast. Obviously, I've never been that high up as far north is concerned, because it's practically uninhabitable up there, and that's kind of the point. I mean, we need to be able to say that we've left some parts of the world alone. I mean, just a couple. You know what I mean? What were you going to say, Raven?
Well, I mean, I'm just that someone in the chat just apparently bashing on homes, and I don't know what the prejudice and the bigotry against hobbits and their homes. I don't know what that's about.
It's the hairy feet.
I think we live in a gentler society.
There is an inherent problem with hobbit holes, and that's rising damp from the water table.
Yeah. Thanks to other things that we do. But the thing is, as far as solar, every house that is suitable for solar should have solar. So I have solar,
and every new build has to have solar.
Yeah, and the thing is that okay, so mine is done as a lease, so it cost me zero out of pocket, and so instead of having to spend $40,000 to put it on, didn't pay a penny. So I pay a lease payment. I have not paid PS other than the hookup charge. I have not paid PSE&G a cent in 3 years. I'm actually now a net producer of power because of the way that I had it implemented. So yeah, why not? You're laughing like this is some horrible thing.
Yeah. I have no problem, and I know like a few years ago the light bulbs, everybody lost their fuck, which made no sense. It still makes no sense to me. But like, I have no problem with a new technology coming along, and like, oh my, look, you can have electric house, right? And having the government get behind that as saying everybody should have this, right? And then a new technology comes along that makes that one obsolete. I think the government should get behind that and begin to phase out the old things, because the new one is better for society, better for everyone as people, power, better for the everything. I have no problem with that. And if it means that new homes are built with solar panels, then God damn
Good.
it, let's do it. Good.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to say that, like when I was a kid and for decades before that, I'm sure, I mean, the idea of progress was seen as a good thing. Making things better than they used to be was seen as a good thing. So like the light bulbs, for example, not only are they more efficient, but they use way less electricity. So you're going to spend less money. Why is spending less money on your electric bill supposed to be a bad thing? I just
I
can't get
love LED lights. They
yeah.
are just
Yeah,
yeah.
and they're vastly superior to the CFLs even, because the CFL light was so, but the LEDs are bright as hell. And of course, Quinca can't say something positive without having something negative at the end, right? As far as living off the grid, fuck that. Get an extension cord for my grid. This off the grid stuff. I don't understand this And look, I have massive contempt for most of humanity, but I still don't understand this off the grid xenophobic bullshit of wanting to live in a fucking yurt in the middle of nowhere. Fuck that noise. I like civilization.
You can't, like, in my, apparently it's a town by town thing in New Jersey. In my town, we cannot completely move ourselves from it's against town ordinance. If you remove yourself from the grid here, the Board of Health can condemn your house.
What I would like to see, because in chat I said I would love to live off grid. What I mean by that is that I would love for my house to be grid neutral, for want of a better word.
Yeah,
I'd like it to generate the electricity I use, and maybe have a little bit spare that I can maybe sell back to the electricity company.
Yeah.
I would like to be able to be self-sustaining when it comes to water and gas and other things. Those I can't do. Yeah.
So,
electricity, I can.
Yeah,
So yeah, maybe self-sufficiency is a better.
That's a much better and more accurate term than off the grid.
I used to want to have a little like farmstead in Canada somewhere with some chickens and goats and a windmill and maybe even a water mill for generating electricity and some solar panels, of course. And not so I didn't have to have electricity, and I fancied, this is before the internet, so I fancied I didn't need a phone really, and I could just live there and raise my family and pretend it was like 100 years ago, right? But like you said, I like civilization too much. I'm way too spoiled. It's that simple. You know what I mean? Especially now that I've had the internet in my life for like 25 years or whatever. I mean, I can't even imagine. I can't remember sufficiently how I entertained myself when I was bored before the internet. I can't remember. I think I must,
But to the chat, like I said, there's a difference between wanting to be self-sufficient, which I'm totally for. And in fact, what I'd like to do now is like do more energy recovery. So not only want my electricity to be efficient, we have gas for heat. I want, and for the stove, I want that to be more efficient. I want to do all sorts of things so that I produce less waste and I'm more self-sufficient. But that's different than being this off the grid crap. Because everybody I see that say they want to be off the grid is living in the middle of fucking nowhere. I'm sorry. My feeling is that when you want to live far away from like civilization, there's a certain amount of xenophobia in there.
Which Vegas asks an interesting question there. How is wanting to live off grid xenophobic? I'm not quite sure I make that connection
Joe just
either.
explained what he meant by that. It's like, if you want to isolate yourself, maybe there's something a little bit like you're afraid of the other, I guess, is the implication. I don't know that I agree with that, but I never really thought about it like that. So I'd have to think about it.
Maybe you just want to live up in the woods in harmony with nature the way that the Native Americans used to.
I live in the woods, Q, and I guarantee everyone on this page is a nice quiet suburb. I don't know, but I mean I do. Well, Paul, nice quiet area.
I live in a very quiet area. There's, it's extremely. We're remote where I actually live.
Yeah, I'm in a village.
I'm in New Jersey, so I'm not remote. But I mean, I pay for. I don't pay for water either. That all, my land takes care of all that.
Yeah, same.
So if I had solar panels, utilities, I wouldn't have any utility bills, right? No, well, yeah, I mean, because I could go electric heat. Yeah, any utility bill.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd like to live in a cave. If you never
Yeah,
watched the Bond films, those super villains places they have in these caves.
About 3 foot away from where I'm sitting right now. I mean, I have a hookup for a stove. I wanted to go and get. I would my desk.
Yeah. I'm in a suburb, and I am in invisible sight of New York City. I can see Manhattan from here. So that's how, so I'm not way out in the middle of nowhere. I'm in.
We have mountain lion, coyote, and bear. I live. That's the I am.
We have bears where I live as well. They turn over the dumpster a couple times a year.
And as far as like how quiet it is, well, my neighbor's house is about 14 feet away from mine. So, and on that side, and on the other side, it's 11 feet. So
too close for me.
Yeah. So I don't know that proximity would qualify as xenophobic.
My nearest neighbor is under our floor, and we've got another one behind that wall. So
yeah, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do it.
Where I live at the moment is the first time I've ever, not ever, but it's the first time since like 1965, I guess, that I've lived more than 30 miles from the ocean. And that's kind of, I never really thought about it until I didn't live near the ocean anymore. And I thought, well, I wonder when the next time I'm going to see the ocean is.
Well,
I've always lived near the ocean, and I almost never go to it.
Living in the UK for as long as you did, Paul, it's hard to live here and not be within a short drive of the ocean.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's literally not a single spot in the UK that's more than 81 miles away from the coast. So
yeah.
I mean, I could go out my backyard, Proctor. I could go out my backyard, right? It's an acre back. It's an acre of property, so I can go back and cross the stream and keep walking straight and be in the woods for miles and miles and miles. There's straight back, there's nobody. I mean, if I go off to one side or the other, I'll eventually somebody's backyard, but straight back, it's miles back. It's just woods and wilderness and mountains, and New York State is just like 2 miles away or something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, we were pretty close. Cause I remember last time I came, I was coming back from up north, and I crossed the border, and it was like, I think it might be like 3 or 4 miles to your place from the border. Like, holy shit.
Yeah. I mean, we can have parties all night, and we can have bonfires, and yeah. The problem with the bonfires, though, is actually attracts the bear. Yeah, you would think it scares them away, but it doesn't. It attracts them.
Did you say you get cougars where you live as well?
Yeah, mountain lion, yeah. Right. The eastern cougar, which is officially they're gone. They're officially they're extinct, but they're not. There's some here.
And are they more like urban? Like when I lived in the UK, there's more foxes around outer London than there is in Cornwall or Dorset.
Wow,
they're safer there. Because we have a lot of foxes.
Much more for them to pick through.
Yeah, and we have a lot of foxes, red foxes and gray.
Well, and that's how dogs started, right, Paul? I mean, basically, wolves started following humans around and eating the garbage, and then some humans said, "Hey, I want that creature to live in my house with me."
Well, it probably thought, hey, that creature would be useful for keeping the predators away from the goats.
Yeah.
But I'd like to ask Rob a question, and I've forgotten what it was. Oh, yeah, to do with campfires, or rather fires attracting bears. Are you sure it's the fire and not the meat that's cooking on it?
Well, yeah, that's more likely the case. Yeah.
My wife used to. I've been in Nashua, Quinn. My wife used to live there, and we visited there a number of years ago.
Nice.
Well, on that note, I am going to bid farewell, adieu, and thanks for the chat. Bye
Thanks
to
for hanging out
everybody in the
so long,
chat,
Brian.
and fingers crossed. See you next week.
All right, nice one. See
Ciao
ya.
for now. Have a
Ciao.
good one.
So yeah, I'm in one of the few green places left in the state of New Jersey.
Well, they're in the Pine Barrens.
Yeah. The Pine Barrens. I mean, there are people living there too. Talk about off the grid.
Yeah, a friend of mine encountered basically a homeless shanty town in the Pine Barrens, and there was like 150 people living in this little,
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know how they survive the winter. I mean, that's rough living. I mean, I don't know how they get food.
Yeah.
I mean, how do they? That's a rough place to live. People who are unfamiliar with the Pine Barrens, there's an area of New Jersey where it's barren and pine. It's miles and miles and miles of pine forest, and that's like all that can grow there. It's all that will ever grow there.
Right.
And it's there's no like communities. Like there's nobody that really officially lives there. There's no power, there's no water. It's just miles and miles of pine. And there are people that live back there. And I mean, there's a lot of like local legends about those people. Like they eat people and they're inbred and all kinds of weird, crazy stuff. I don't know, and I don't want to go find out.
But yeah, you have to take a survey. That'd be an uncomfortable conversation. Excuse me, have you fucked your cousin?
It's where is that? Is that the New Jersey? Yeah, the New Jersey Devil. That's where the New Jersey Devil supposedly lives in the Pine Barrens.
Yeah. Hence, and then which is what the hockey team is named after.
Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned about the shanty town. That's one thing with we're talking a little while ago while Brian was still here about the increase the moratorium on evictions. And I've only lived in Boulder for since July of last summer, and the homeless population has at least tripled in that amount of time. And that's with a ban on evictions. Yeah. So what's going to happen if this ban being overturned continues? It's kind of terrifying to contemplate.
It's a tough situation because I actually kind of agree. I hate saying this. I kind of agree with the judge, but that doesn't mean it's right to do it. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, there's a difference between legally right and morally right.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and here's the other thing too that again, the people that are like the extreme fans of capitalism, shall we say, having a large number of people suddenly become homeless is bad for capitalism. It's bad for our society, and again, it's bad for the capitalists. Because if you have people that were to some degree productive members of society, and now they won't be. Even if we're not directly paying for their services, there's still people going out. The tax base shrinks. It's bad for the fucking economy. But that's the thing. And basically, people on the right wing, they used to understand the economy, or at least I thought they did, but they don't. At least not anymore. They really don't.
Green machine, right? The eviction ban was a half-assed solution. Yes, it was. It was. This went on a lot longer than anybody thought it would. If we were able to get this whole thing under control months and months ago, it would have been a much less of an issue. There was a lot of lack of forethought put into it.
If people wore their fucking masks and went by the social distancing guidelines, we wouldn't be in this hellscape we are in now. I unfriended 2 high school friends this past week over this shit because they basically both said like, well, they basically said, yeah, they wear the mask, but they only wear them because they have to. And I'm like, so you're basically and one guy, he wasn't a friend, he's a friend of a friend. He got COVID. And I'm like, well, dude, that means wherever you went where you didn't have masks on, the chance that you spread it to somebody is extremely likely. I said, you're the reason why we need to keep doing this shit, because you're running around because you think it's your freedoms, and no freedom is absolute. And to use the libertarian example, if you're infected and you go around spreading the disease to everybody else, you are committing an act of force against everybody else.
Right.
So that society has a right to use force against you, right, to stop you from doing that.
So, like everyone, or almost everyone, I guess, I am sick and tired of the masks. I am. I'm sick of them. And I don't complain. And I, 99% compliance when I walk out the door. Um, you know, um, I was at a diner today with my mom at the local diner, and I got up to pay the bill and I forgot to put my mask on. And I got halfway to the cashier and I said, "Oh crap!" I turned around and got my mask. And as I was putting it on, I said, "I am so sick of these things." And there was a guy in the booth next to my mom, and he said, "Pretty soon, we're almost done. We're almost done." I was like, "Yeah, we're almost done."
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know, was it last weekend, I guess, Joe and his people announced that if you're outdoors and you've been vaccinated and you're not in a densely, crowded place, that it's okay not to have a mask on. So we took the grandkids out to the park today and didn't have masks on because there's hardly any, it's very sparse and we're outdoors, and that's the advice. And like, I'm glad that things are getting to the point where you don't have to feel that it's necessary everywhere you go. But I will be wearing masks in businesses and any place else that I go indoors with people in it for quite some time, whether they tell me to or not.
Well, see, here's the thing, Quinca. There are people here in New Jersey that don't. And again, they're right-wingers. The liberals are actually following the rules. It's only right-winger fucking, I want my freedoms and fuck everybody else, right-wingers that are not compliant here. And so this is the thing. There's those assholes like you guys that are keeping us in this hellscape.
Well, I think that hopefully we will get to a critical mass. I mean, with vaccinations, I know that the pace of vaccinations slowed down a lot, and that's kind of depressing, but it's still, more than 1 million people a day are getting vaccinated. And now that they've vaccinated 12 to 15-year-olds as well.
And here's one thing I'll need to say for like probably the 98th time, and I'm not even exaggerating. The vaccination protects me. The mask protects you. So you should want me to wear a mask because I'm protecting you. And I want you to wear a mask to protect me because that's what they're for.
Yeah.
So no, the mask doesn't make you immune. In fact, the mask only protects you a little bit. It protects other people more than it protects you, which is something we've been trying to tell you dickheads for fucking 13 months now.
Right.
14 months.
Well,
and you won't get through your head.
I never really minded wearing a mask until I started wearing glasses again, Joe. And when you wear glasses, I find it, I didn't really mind, but I do find it slightly annoying now because they get, there's a conflict of interest on the bridge of my nose,
yeah,
shall we say. But it's a small price to pay. That's the way I look at it, but it is annoying.
But that's the thing, and here's the thing. This is projection. No, what we have is we have a right-wing cult that thinks that wearing a mask is socialism, and so that they refuse to wear one because they think that's a sign that they're brave, and it's actually a sign that they're timid because they have to kowtow to their group because they have to show up. See, it's performative. This is everything the right wing does is performative. It's just like the people who have to put 15 flags on their truck to prove how much of a patriot they are. Real patriots don't give a fuck about whether other people think they're patriots or not because they know they're patriots and they're already secure in that themselves, and they don't need to show it off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I agree. Basically, long and short. Um, anyway, let's get off the whole COVID thing for a minute, Joe, and go in a different direction. Has there anything been pressing on your mind that you've seen in current events lately that we haven't spoken about yet?
Well, I mean, basically, the continuously ironic right wing that's always complaining about cancel culture is now trying yet again to cancel Lynn Cheney because she won't drink the Kool-Aid, and it's pretty troubling because basically they're basically doubling down on Trumpism. It's basically like, if you are not into Trumpism, you don't belong in our party. And I don't know how they think that's a winning strategy. Even if they think Trump's this great winner, basically by pairing people off and making the party smaller, that shrinks their power base, not increases it. And this is the problem that Trump had the whole time, is he never tried to build a coalition to expand.
Well, what they're gambling on, Joe, is that they can intimidate enough people to either not stand again or to be primaried out of existence. And they're having, what in more traditional dictatorships we would call a purge. They're having a purge in their party right now, and we've seen this happen in other countries around the world. And so I want to know what we're going to do, or if we can do anything from outside of the Republican Party to stop it from becoming a straight up fascist party.
I don't know that there's anything we can do within the law to stop it. It's really what's going to happen is that my prediction is that the party will shrink and collapse under its own weight, because it's funny. You look back at all the Republicans over the last 15, 20 years that have said stuff. We have to stop being the stupid party. There's not enough angry white men to keep us in power. The writing's been on the wall for ages, and they just keep going further down the same road that they've known for ages as a bad road. But
they're openly anti-democratic at the moment, and it's not a coincidence. And I hate to be the guy that says Russia, but it's not a coincidence that all the QAnon talking points and all of the same right-wing talking points that are coming out of our right-wing politicians right now are also on Russian media. And I mean, it doesn't take you're not connecting too many dots to see that. You know what I mean? It's not like it's some convoluted, it's pretty straightforward. And I'm not saying that Russia controls the Republican Party, but it kind of looks like a lot of people in the Republican Party are pretty okay with being in cahoots with the political aims of Russia.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because basically, who did Trump like as far as, world leaders? Autocrats, because he wanted to be one. And that's the thing. They really only care about power anymore. A green machine, I would say, based on what Biden's been trying to push forward, I do not believe anymore that it's accurate to say that the Democrats are weak. The problem that the Democrats have right now is that basically Joe Manchin, because he is in a very red state, and so basically he's concerned about his own job. He doesn't really care as much about the party. He's trying to hold on to his own job. And unfortunately for the Democrats, the math just works out that they cannot get anything done unless he okays it, at least right now. So it's going to be really critical for the Democrats that they have to gain seats in 2022 in the Senate, so then he becomes irrelevant, because as long as they got 50 not counting him, they can do whatever they need to do.
What's frustrating about Joe Manchin is that if he wasn't there, it would be a Republican. And it's just that simple. I mean, he is like,
at least he's persuadable.
To some degree.
I don't even know if he's that. I don't know if he's that persuadable. But
I think he's enjoying his 15 minutes of fame right now.
Oh, I think he's loving it.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Q. I really don't like addressing you, but it's not the left that's fighting the culture war. It's not the left. It's the left isn't weak because of culture war. We focus on the culture war because we're not, and we haven't been for years. The
Yeah.
culture war is being fought from the right,
And has been for years.
and has been for years. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that basically the people on the left that are engaging in anything that could be related to the culture war are people on Twitter. Well, they're not elected officials.
yeah, and
Unlike
also,
unlike Republicans who are on Twitter who are elected officials engaging in the culture war.
right. And by far, the Democrats aren't the left, but right. But the Democrats aren't either. The Democratic platforms have been about unions and working people and blue collar stuff. It's just that nobody pays any attention to them because the right keeps saying transgender, transgender girls in sports, gay marriage, bakeries being forced to give up their rights. It's the right that is fighting the culture war. The left is done.
Yeah, because basically,
I just want to make a comment I wanted to make a little minute ago before we sort of veered off. I mean, one thing I'm kind of pissed off about with the Republicans right now is they kind of make me having to defend Lynn Cheney, who is a despicable politician by any regard, right? And like, and just in terms of her voting record and her general public pronouncements have been loathable over the years, as far as I'm concerned. And now she's being sort of put up as a poster child for Republican ethics. Yeah, and that's just obscene to me.
Well, he again, like I was saying too about the the so-called we're talking about the culture war. So they say that the left cancels people simply for disagreeing with them. Lynn Cheney disagrees on one thing with the rest of her party. One thing. She's for, pretty well, like you said, she's for everything else they want to do, but she doesn't agree with one thing, and they're kicking and they want to basically oust her. So think about that. This is why I said they project. I mean, each one of them could run a 20 screen multiplex because they project so fucking much.
And Lynn Cheney threw her own sister under the bus in order to run for office in the first place. Because she had to sort of distance herself from her sister because her sister's a lesbian.
Right.
Yep.
And the right is always, they're the ones that are always talking about woke. Oh, woke this, woke that. Woke. Seriously, I mean, it's nonsense. It's all.
Oh, it's their biggest buzzword. They love it. And the funniest thing about what's going on right now in what passes for political discourse is how some of these buzzwords are just. I mean, if you ever took like a corporate class and you learn what corporate buzzwords are, you learn to spot media buzzwords as well. And this whole woke thing has just been completely subverted from what it originally meant maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I first started hearing it around, and what they say it means has nothing to do with what it originally meant. Shocking, I know, total straw man.
Yeah. Crazy. And Vegas, I'm sorry if I don't like most of the choices, period. The whole neoliberal, the Democrats, I ran as a Democrat. I'm a registered Democrat. Anybody who knows me knows that I am far too socialistic leaning to be a Democrat. But if my choices are between somebody who actively wants to hurt me and somebody who just isn't going to help me at all but not hurt me, I'm going to go with the less pain. I'm sorry. I just have a problem with a party that prefers me being dead.
Well, right. Also, as far as
or not existing,
the number of actual neoliberals that are left in the Democratic Party are small. Sinema, Manchin, a couple others. They no longer represent the majority of the party. Unfortunately, again, because of the math work, the way the math works out, we can't get anything done without them, and we can't get rid of them because then we lose the seats. That's the thing. You have to have the majority, or at least the plurality, the majority in order to control the agenda. So we're stuck with him for now. We're stuck with Sinema for now.
What did you think when Romney got booed in Utah, just basically for saying he didn't agree with Trump, and they basically almost booed him off the stage.
They did boo him off the stage.
This is the state of where the people on the boots are. I mean, I was worried that it was just a few extremists in sort of elected office who were riding Trump's coattails for their own benefit, but it does seem to be that there's more grassroots support out there than I ever realized.
Yeah, they don't own me, and fuck you for ever even suggesting anything but me with people owning me. Fuck you twice, This is why you and I will never be anything.
That's
Ever
an
like.
extremely poor choice of
I
word.
don't. Yeah, it's a really important. But I mean, what does it even mean? I mean, you can say that corporate America or neoliberals own how? What? How? How? Make that make sense.
Or
You
not.
can't.
Let's not
Because
talk
again,
about
this
let's talk
is
about
all the
something
right wing has. Ha ha! It's all about owning the libs. It's all it is fucking high school bullshit, throwing, shit flinging. It's pathetic.
Well, what's going on right now with the actual Republican Party is it's just turned into a grievance party, and they have no platform whatsoever. And
Literally.
by itself, that should make them unelectable. But look, shocking, with gerrymandering and voter suppression, they're not unelectable. And that's
I mean, during the election, wasn't the Republican platform was whatever Trump says?
It was. They made literally whatever Trump says.
Right.
That is
Literally.
and that's the point where it goes from you're no longer a political party about ideas, is that you're about a cult of personality. You're like,
right.
We'll do whatever their leader says. So they turned into, and I remember, when I was a kid, I didn't like the Republicans, but at least they were patriotic, really patriotic, not this fake performative bullshit that they do now. They actually wanted to defend America from something bad. Now it's literally like, we don't give a fuck as long as liberals are sad and as long as we follow the dear leader. So they've turned into the same people that they were afraid of. They turned into the people who were all about, North. They're basically the North Koreans. They are the North Koreans that support the Kim family. That's who they are now.
Well, I was going to say what you just said, Joe, about the whole dear leader thing. I mean, I find it obscene as an American. And I've said this before, I know, on the Jamborees, but it's incomprehensible to me that Americans, of all the people in the world, could laud someone as obviously flawed as Trump. I mean, I can almost understand hero worship if it's someone who's admirable, but Trump was literally not unadmirable in every single human quality that you might want someone to be admirable with. He's got no generosity. He's got no tact. He's got no sense of humor. He's got no grace. He's got no sense of dignity.
He's intellectually dull.
Yeah, he has no ideological center. He has no moral center. Yeah, he's
Here's one thing too. It just hit me. Republicans used to always talk about values, and sometimes we used to laugh at them because they got, you can't trying to legislate values. They don't talk about values anymore at all because they don't have any anymore. Yeah, he is the 7 deadly sins walking around with a bad toupee. He is the 7 deadly sins personified.
Yeah. Well, you're right. He's got all the bad qualities, that's for sure, and none of the good qualities. And I don't know. And so anyway, I'm just surprised that people fell for it. I've never not been surprised, and it just seems to be getting worse because he doesn't even have to do anything at the moment. Thank goodness his social exposure is limited, which brings me on brilliantly to another thing I hoped we talk about tonight, and that's the fact that this week Facebook's board of advisors decided to maintain Trump's ban from the platform for at least another 6 months until Facebook comes up with a better policy. And here's the thing. Trump ain't changing in 6 months.
No.
So what's the fucking point? I mean,
they're just playing kick the can this way. It's like, well, we didn't permanently ban them because they're weak. But Green Machine, I'm not confused about why people. I just said before. Again, more irony is that the right wing complains about identity politics. They love Trump. It's all about their identity. All about their identity.
I say it all the time. All politics are identity politics.
Right.
But yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, here are the 7 deadly sins: lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. And Trump exudes all 7 of those in spades.
Yeah. You could add a few to the list easily as well. I mean,
yeah.
For sure when it comes to Trump. But anyway, no. And so I'm not sure I really understand. Well, I think I do, but it's not a very nice thing because, the whole thing about Trumpism from my point of view, is a really and Joe, you didn't come to the conversation in time for this, but earlier I asked, what's worse, Trump or Trumpism, and it was pretty much came to the conclusion that
I think I caught the end of it. Yeah,
Trumpism it was.
Yes.
And the thing is, for me, is like Trumpism is I think a very unfortunate euphemism for white supremacy. I'd rather it was called white supremacy, because that way something might be done about it. Right? Yeah. Or people might realize that there's something that they don't want to be associated with. People might not mind being associated with Trumpism, but I don't think they want to be associated with white supremacy.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, fewer and fewer people care about, or it's weird. They don't want to be called it, even though that's what they actually believe. But yeah, you're right. I mean, here's the thing. One thing when I've been down lately, I watched the Great Dictator speech, Charlie Chaplin, and my favorite line in that, there's so many great lines, but one of my favorite lines is, as long as men die, liberty will never perish. So, but what Rob said before is true. So yeah, Trump will one day die, whether it's tomorrow or 30 years from now. He will eventually die. But the fact that ideas generally don't die, especially seems bad ones. And that is the scary part, because, that will outlive him.
Well, what Trump has laid bare, which is really disturbing to me, is that, if you're the president of the United States, all it really takes is to have the will to break all the norms, and you can get away with anything. But you have to have the will to do it. No one really had the will to do it, because they kind of cared about their reputation and didn't think that they could, wanted to go down in history as America's worst or first dictator or whatever,
Yeah. I mean, George W. Bush joked about it. Yeah, even Nixon. George W. Bush joked about it, as long as I'm the dictator, which, that's the thing. The fact that didn't bother enough people, because the Republicans were already, that's the thing. And I've said about Trump is that Trump is not the cause. He is a symptom. He's basically all the worst aspects of the right wing all rolled up into one. But again, when W. Bush joked about it, and I felt there were not a sufficient number of people who were appalled by it. But that pushed the penny. That kind of was already breaking norms. Even joking about being a dictator for a president is a horrible fucking thing. No American president ever should have joked about that. And here's the thing, too, McConnell. There's one thing I do get kind of annoyed at the media. They keep talking about this fight within the Republican Party. There is no fight within the Republican Party, and that's the more troublesome part. Is that basically they're booting out the ones who would put up a fight. But McConnell's pretty much capitulated already. Right,
but here's the thing. I mean, people like Mitch McConnell, especially, he's been in politics for at least 30-something years, right? 38 years or something like that. And the Senate, and he should be savvy enough to know that this Trumpism thing is a moment. It can't be where the party goes. It can't be, because even if the Liz Cheneys of the party basically won't cooperate, that's enough to keep them out of power, right? If people who have the Liz Cheney brand of republicanism don't vote Republican, Republicans can never win again, right? They need, even if that is the smaller faction within the party, they can't function without it.
Well, that's why McConnell takes the stance that he does. I mean, McConnell takes the stance he does because of that. That's exactly why. It's like he can say, all we're going to do is block whatever this administration wants to do. And doesn't talk about Trump at all, or at least as little as possible. I mean, that way he can step away and he can keep legitimacy of the party while not trying to trump the Trumpers.
Yeah.
He plays both sides against the middle.
Yeah. And Vegas, I don't think any of us have ever said that it's only white supremacy. As I said many times, angry white guys actually have a reason to be angry. They're just not at the things that they're angry, the people that they're angry at. The people it's the people they vote for that keep feeding their anger is actually the people that are exploiting them, but they won't see it because they stroke that ego. They do that identity thing. The real America. And again, going back even to W. Bush, the real America. So, but I know you're desperate to try to find a way that it's not, because I know you want to think that racism is not that big a deal, but you're wrong. So, I mean, you're always looking for that way that it's not racism, and it's not only racism. So to be fair, it's not only racism, but it's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, sure.
Bigotry. I mean, you think about it, the arguments from the right for a long time, we go right back to the culture war thing, right, have been the Democrats or socialists who are trying to destroy the country. They want to take your jobs away and give them to illegal immigrants that they let into the country because they opened up the borders, and they're going to force you to make cakes for gay people and force your daughters to share bathrooms with men.
And they say all that like it's a bad thing.
And they say all that. I mean, and that is the message that they're saying that the left is selling. They're saying that that's what the left stands for. That's what Democrats want to give you. That is what will happen if you don't vote for us. And it's all bullshit.
Right.
It's all bullshit, and it's all based on racism and hatred and bigotry. It's what it's all based on. And what they do is they play on your fears. They're fear mongers. There's no platform. They don't have any economic plan. They haven't been able to pass a fucking budget in a Republican Congress in how fucking long? I mean, come on, give me a break. It's all CRs, CR after CR after CR after CR. Why? Because they don't have a fucking budget. So
right, because they haven't had ideas for a long time. Right, when Trump first took office, they controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and they still couldn't get things passed.
They still couldn't get shit passed.
The only thing they were able to do was stack the federal courts. That's it. And the Supreme Court. That's what all they got through.
And then they had the nerve to herald that as the best thing about Trump. So they actually took pride in that. It wasn't like it was a secret sort of under the table kind of plan. It was the main plan to stack the courts for the next 25 years.
Right. So it's
no plan to end the war in Afghanistan. No economic plan. For the pandemic, there was no plan to deal with the pandemic. No plan for anything.
Trump's trying to have no plan when it came to the pandemic.
But it's not just Trump, though. I mean, it's the entire Republican Party. They have no plan.
And this is the reason why you shouldn't vote for people who don't believe in government, because basically every time the Republicans get in control, they basically try to break things because they keep trying to tell us that government's the problem. So what they do is they come in and then they basically try to break the government, and then they go, oh, see, the government doesn't work. It's like, well, no, only when you motherfuckers run it.
No, Vegas, I cannot name one good faith reason why someone would vote for Trump. No, there aren't any, because he stood for nothing. I can't think of a good faith reason why anybody would vote for a Republican, period.
I would ask any Trump supporter who was willing to have an honest conversation, what 5 things Trump did for America, not for you, but for America. What were the 5 best things that Trump did for America? Because you can't come up with 5 things. You'd struggle for 2.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. A lot of people try to tell me that because I'm in small business, and business people have a tendency to lean Republican. But you look at Trump's tax cut. It didn't do shit for small business. It did nothing for small business. So even though all the idiot small business people went out and voted for the fucker because they thought he was going to help them, and he did nothing, because again, the Republicans never do anything for small business because they don't give a fuck about small business. They only care about major corporations.
Oh my God.
They're donors.
And how many times I heard, oh, but what about the veteran choice bill? Oh, you mean the one that Obama signed into law in 2014, you dumbass? It's just like they give him credit for shit he didn't do, shit that Obama signed. I mean, it's just, give me a fucking break. There is no good faith reason to vote for Trump, because he had no policies, no platform. They had no plan for anything. He ran on, I'm not Hillary.
Right. Well, here's the thing too. Like, okay, yeah, that's a good one, Jonah. Well, think about also when he pulled us out of the TPP. So, okay, now here's the irony: the TPP was not popular on the left and from my opinion, all the wrong reasons. But basically, pulling us out, that didn't give us any leverage over China. That was the whole point of the TPP, from our perspective, was to put some limits on China to kind of slow them down and cut down on some of the stuff they do.
Right. And now we've lost a lot of trade with Australia that has gone to China.
Right.
We pulled out TPP, it hurt us big time.
Right. And the thing is, and it was the same thing with pulling out of the Iran deal. I mean, basically, if you feel that the deal you have isn't good, leaving it doesn't give you a stronger hand, it gives you a weaker hand, because now you have no leverage over the other side. So now, fortunately, basically, because Biden isn't a fucking moron, he's saying to the Iranians, look, Iran, we want you to come back and join the family of nations. So we're willing to do stuff if you make some concrete steps in the right direction. And so now we're actually talking to them, because you know what? Yeah, you can't negotiate with people that you don't fucking talk to.
Right.
And Iran, I mean, from their perspective, I mean, they're saying things that if I were in their shoes, I'd be saying too. You know, we already had a deal. You pulled out, number one. And number two, okay, this sounds good. What happens in 4 years?
Right.
Right. You don't have any credibility anymore.
Or with Trump is international relations are going to be screwed for probably a generation. It's going to take a few presidents to restore what Trump ruined.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing, and it's the same thing, I'll point out to any right winger that if they want to look at Brexit, because look at all the problems the Brits are having now. Now they're actually having like gunboat diplomacy with the French over fishing rights in the Jersey Islands, because pulling out of Brexit, because they thought that was going to be some panacea. Oh, it turns out when you leave the sweetheart deal you had, now you still have the responsibilities if you want to sell in the European market, and you get none of the benefits because you're not part of this. You're not part of the special deal anymore. So and that's why I argue that when people try to say that our Democrats are like the right wing in other countries, like, no, maybe our left isn't the same as the left in other countries, but the Democrats are not the same as the right wing in Britain, at least.
What was horrifying from my point of view is after Brexit, after the vote, that the Google trending questions after the vote with people asking what is Brexit. And it's just like, oh my fucking God, you voted. How did you not know what the fuck you were voting on?
Yeah. Because again, that was also xenophobia.
The amount of disinformation that was flying around the Brexit campaign, and I'm sorry to say this, but from both sides, was really, really disturbing. And it was to the point, honestly, where if you weren't very sort of hip on politics in general, you're probably going to believe whatever you're most exposed to, or whatever confirmation bias, or whatever your biases already exist, whichever side of the argument we're on, you're probably going to go with that, because both sides are lying. For example, the Remain side was David Cameron said, it might cause a nuclear war if we go with Brexit. Now, overstatements like that don't help your argument one tiny little bit,
Well, I know, like, and I don't know exactly how the question was worded, but I do know that sometimes that's a problem too. Like Prop 8 had that issue. The way that the question was worded on Prop 8 confused a lot of people. So there were people voting that were like, okay, I voted yes. That means I'm like helping, the LGBT community, right? No, no. If you voted yes, then you voted wrong.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's sometimes it's the wording throws people, especially if they're not really up on following politics and.
Well, and most people aren't, and this is one part of the problem too. We talked before about messaging, is that the problem. One of the reasons why the right wing wins more than they should, based on what people actually think about the issues versus how they actually vote, is because a lot of the right-wing talking points are visceral. They appeal to that reptilian brain, and some of them just seem like, okay, the whole idea of like, like, well, do you want to subsidize, people with bad drug habits on welfare? Well, no, of course not. Everyone, no one wants that. But what's your alternative? What are you going to do? And first of all, is it even happening? Which turns out not really happening. And two, there's better ways to deal with it when it does happen than kicking people off their benefits. But everything they do is based on punishment, and nothing is curative. It's all. So
everything is worded to make you afraid.
Yeah,
it's all about fear.
Since at least September 11th.
Yeah. Yes, there is an intersection between Bernie Sanders and Trump people, because again, because populism, because it's the same populist message. The difference is Bernie Sanders is coming out from the left with stuff that would actually potentially work, and Trump is not. But yeah, and like I said, because again, the people who like Trump, they're pissed off, and they're not wrong to be pissed off. They have a legitimate grievance. They don't necessarily know what the answer is. And they're easily swayed by simplistic arguments.
Okay,
I think in 2016, sorry, real quick, in 2016, I think there's a definite huge crossover of people who were just like, I'm against the establishment, and so they would have voted for the best non-establishment candidate. And because the Democrats didn't offer a non-establishment candidate, they voted for the Republican one.
Right.
So yeah, if you take Vegas's last few questions and kind of put them together, do you see an intersection between a segment of Bernie Sanders people and Trump people? And also, can you name a good faith reason why somebody would vote for Trump? Then yes. I mean, before I said no, absolutely not. It's always going to be based on some kind of craziness or fear. But yeah, now that you've added that last question, sure, there are people who wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders because of anti-establishment reasons who went with Trump for the same reason, and I would say that's a good faith reason. It's a hell of a lot better than a lot of reasons why most people voted for Trump.
Right.
But we're talking about a small percentage here.
And here's the thing, though, and that made sense. And you're right. It's one, it's a small position, and two, that's 2016 before Trump actually got into office.
Yeah.
Once he actually got there, and we saw what he actually did and didn't do, then the argument goes out the window. So you can make the argument for 2016, but not, I know somebody who voted for Trump in 2016, who voted for Obama twice and then voted for Trump because he thought Trump's tax plan would benefit him personally. It didn't, but he thought it would. So okay, that was a good faith reason. But after living through 4 years of Trump and seeing what he did and didn't do, one could not then make the same argument anymore.
Right. And also Bernie Sanders, I was a Bernie dude. I wasn't like a what do they call Bernie or bust?
Bernie bro.
Yeah, it wasn't Bernie. It wasn't Bernie bro. It wasn't Bernie or bust. But I love me some Bernie Sanders, and my view here is that Bernie Sanders is the most consequential politician of our lifetime.
Right.
He changed the conversation. He changed everything. We are talking about things today we would have
Bernie people like to admit it or not. Bernie's influence on the Biden administration is kind of evident. I don't think Bernie got his way on anything, but his influence is kind of obvious.
Yeah. It's heavy. It's heavy. His influence is heavy on it.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that's true. Yes, Bernie had a big influence, and two, I also think, and I've said this even before the election, that I felt that Biden, because people are looking at 50 years of Biden and not looking at some other things, I think people were thinking he was not as liberal as he really is. The other thing too, so I was watching something the other day about Biden, and basically said that Biden. They were basically trying to say that in the same way that, or in a similar way to the fact that Trump has no ideological center, that Biden doesn't have a hardcore one either. But but the reason why is, but that enables him to say, okay, the people in my party want this more liberal agenda, so I'll go with that because that seems to be popular.
Yeah, it is something that actually they do kind of have in common, and for Trump, it's actually a detriment. But for Joe, it works out because he's not being swayed by individualistic arguments. Like there aren't people going to him, or they might be going to him and saying it, but it's not swaying him. What's swaying him is what the majority of people want, and that's good. That's going to be, it's the same propensity with a different outcome. So
yeah, and this is the reason why, and I said to, and well, you guys heard me say it many times, that I kept trying to say to progressives that you have more power by being inside than being on the outside. That you're saying, well, if I don't vote for him, then he'll come to me. Like, well, no, politicians almost never do that because they're not convinced you're actually going to come across with the votes. But if you actually vote for them, then they go, now I am beholden to you because you showed up and I want you to show up again. And so this time, yeah, there were a few progressive holdouts. I'm sure Kate, stayed home or voted for cheese or whatever. But generally speaking, the progressives did come out, and he is recognizing that and saying, I'm not going to ignore the people who voted for me. He's an old school politician, and this is why I get so angry in general. People are like, oh, the establishment. Like, no, it's not that establishment is bad. It's in fact, the whole purpose of an election is to become the establishment or to remake the establishment in your own image. That's the whole point of elections. So what you want, though, is a politician that will basically go with what the people who put him there want.
Okay, so I have a question. What Green Machine? What is an empire politician? Because, like it or not, no matter who is running for president, the U.S. is an empire, and whoever it is that's running, they are running to lead that empire. Bernie Sanders was an empire politician. I mean, so what do you mean by that? This is the American empire. It is global.
I'm really uncomfortable with facing up to that.
Well, I mean, yeah, but the American empire is global, and it's beyond global in its reach. Sure. I mean, we've dominated Mars. I mean, what exactly do you mean by an empire politician? That he defends the American empire? I would hope so if he's the president of it. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I mean, and here's one thing that I'll say about differences between Bernie and Biden. Now, two important things. One, I saw this thing the other day, and I think it's true that they were saying, like, how is Biden putting forth this fairly progressive agenda, and while the Republicans are trying to pin, communist, socialist on him, it's not carrying any weight. It's not getting any traction. It only works with people who are already convinced, right. Already. It's not convincing anybody. And part of it was that, well, again, because he has had a long career of not being, some radical, that it just doesn't work. And so basically they made the point that Biden's a better carrier for Bernie's message than Bernie would be, because their smears would stick easier on Bernie than they do on Biden.
Yes, and they already have, obviously. But you have people who think that he went to Moscow on his honeymoon. When he didn't, he went to St. Lucia. Right. I mean, there's a big temperature difference.
Yeah. He's closer to Moscow, Pennsylvania than he was Moscow, Russia. And the other thing is that Bernie clearly did not, other than the fact of saying, we're going to be nice to other nations, Bernie was clearly uncomfortable talking about the foreign policy arena in general. It was more of like, it was very broad in general. And I think that
he was hands off. I mean, he was very hands off.
Yeah, very hands off. Whereas it's very clear that Biden's planning to be very hands on, trying to rebuild American prestige and American influence around the world.
The empire, and because I wanted to address Green Machine's answer, and okay, so like Bernie Sanders was very hands off, something that Paul would very much like to see from American foreign policy. Hands off. That means no war.
Right.
The problem with that is, being an empire, sometimes you don't have a lot of choices.
That's why I say I'm uncomfortable with the concept of the empire. I don't deny that it exists, but I kind of wish.
But war comes to you. But war comes to you sometimes, and you don't have a lot of options. You don't have a lot of choices. And as far as like motivations are to support and expand global dominance, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I don't know why people really do think that's a bad thing. Global dominance means that your economic system is going to be strong. It means that there's going to be jobs. It means that there's exports. That means that your people are theoretically, your people are rich and living well. That's what all of that means. You're leading the world
Global dominance can mean different things. Global dominance can be cultural or political or military or.
Well, I mean, but across the board, I mean, the U.S. has dominated the globe in pretty much every category across the board,
Right.
and which is pretty much what made it an empire, right? I mean, there are nations that rise and fall based on the whims of the American president. I mean,
I have to interject. I beg you to accept that the rest of the world might not be so cool with American hegemony as Americans.
No, but obviously no, but obviously some are also, and there are some just because of the power of the American economy, just because of the power of the American system, that sometimes the whim of Oprah Winfrey can cause turbulence in markets halfway around the world that cause countries to fall. I mean, that's just part of being a power the size and with the scope that the U.S. has. Good, bad, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Right.
It's what it is.
Plus, here's the other issue too, and this is something that Bo, the fifth columnist, talked about. Is when you pull back, when a country like that pulls back, it creates a power vacuum. Somebody will fill that vacuum. The question is, who fills the vacuum and for what purposes? So it's irresponsible, actually, to just unilaterally pull back.
The U.S. has found itself. The U.S. has found itself in a very, very, very untenable and uncomfortable position where we cannot yield. We can't for that reason. Every time we pull out of somewhere, even as minor conflict, the bad guys move in. And that causes more problems for us down the road.
Yeah, but there's like 200 countries in the world, and America has bases in more than 150 of them, right? I think that's what I'm talking about when it comes to the political and military dominance that I'm not comfortable with. I mean, maintaining all that has to be expensive, and I'm not so sure how necessary it is. And if we could just shave, let's just shave 50% of that overall global reach out. I mean, we've got nuclear weapons. We're virtually no one can fuck with us as far as I'm concerned, and we should just maintain that posture.
Well, here's the thing, Paul, is that okay, in long term, I agree with you, long term. But if we're going to do that, we have to, in partnership with the various people that we get along with, we have to make sure that what fills the void when we go is something that's going to be positive for the world and the region and those countries, and not going to be chaos.
Well, what I'm saying is most of those countries, of the 150 countries I'm talking about, most of them don't have the war going on. Right. You know, we're occupied.
But it's not just war, though.
It's not just about war. It's not just about war. But I think like Europe, right? How many bases do we still have in Europe? I think we should. Most of them should be gone. There's no reason to have them anymore. And I agree. There's a lot of them should be shut down. There's no reason to have them anymore.
Well, yes, there's a number that can, although remember, a lot of them are because we do joint exercises. We have joint commands. There are things where we cooperate with those allies. And so, we can
still do that. Sure. But we can still do that and scale down at the same time. I mean, there's no reason why we should have a lot of them, or why they should be the size that they are in a lot of cases also. And then there are some in countries where just our presence causes problems. I mean, I think a lot of our bases around Iran, it's like surrounded by bases, should be closed.
Sure.
Why are they there? Iran and Iraq, they should be closed. We're not wanted there.
Well, and
just being there is a very
there is to be intimidating in the first place,
right? And that's what I was just going to say. Just us being there is an empirical kind of a thing where we are saying, we're basically forcing, we're here. Hi, deal with us. And how is that a good thing? And how does that work? How is that healthy for international relations? How is that healthy for that country's growth into the family of nations? How is that good for our future? It's not. It's not. So a lot of those should be closed down too.
Well, Vegas, look at the project for a New American Century. That'll define that and pretty much give you an idea what neoconservatism is.
Yeah, straight up.
Yeah, Iraq and Iran used to be each other's check and balance. We kind of fucked it. Yeah, they kind of were. For a long time, they were.
I mean, we funded both sides of that, though. For some period of time, we were giving weapons to both sides, and that's
that.
Oh, we lost Rob.
Lost Rob. I'm sure he's saying something really interesting. I'm going to agree.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
No, now you're back. Yeah.
Now you can. Okay, I was just saying that. Iran and Iraq, they were chess pieces in the Cold War.
Yeah.
I mean, so it was just like they hated each other based on ancient, old and ancient differences. And I guess wars that off and on forever, but we only made it worse. I mean, us in the USSR, we just made it worse. We just pitted them against each other.
This is the thing that gets lost in conversation nowadays, because during the Cold War, countries like, say, Iraq or Iran or Saudi Arabia or lots of secondary level countries, they had to keep sweet, both America and the Soviet Union. They couldn't afford to piss off or antagonize either one. So geopolitics used to have a completely different dimension than it does now. But now we've got one hyperpower, the United States, who's been flexing its muscles for the better part of 2.5 decades all around the world. And a lot of brown people have been getting killed by our drones, and believe me, in other parts of the world, they notice that, right?
Yeah, I just want to say Vegas. No, see, the thing is that's the situation exists. If we were advocating to create the system that exists now, then yeah, you would have a point. But we're basically saying that you can't undo that system willy-nilly without making a mess.
Wait, I want it, Vegas. Are you saying that we don't fit into the imaginary category and mold that you had in your mind of some crazy socialist lefties? That really are you saying now that the image you had of us is apparently completely fucking wrong because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about? Really? Could that be? I don't know. Shut the fuck up. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, like I said, though, there's this big difference between advocating to create the system that we currently have versus saying that to dismantle it, and to dismantle it is going to take some care and planning and not willy-nilly, sunshine and rainbows. You got to think because one of the things that's going to, for instance, is going to be an issue. And here's the funny thing again about the Republicans. Now, obviously, Biden we're getting us out of Afghanistan, which something that, to be fair, something that Trump was starting to do. So I'm going to give credit where credit's due. Maybe the one thing he did that was okay, right? We tried to do. And actually, what Biden's starting to do is they're actually slowing down the timetable. Why? Because they know that if we don't leave the Afghani people, the government in the right states, then it will collapse into chaos, and then worse things that would happen than are happening currently. So it's important that we broke it. Now we gotta make sure we don't break it worse on the way out, and that's being responsible for what your mess is, as opposed to walking away and leaving them.
I think we've had more than ample time to have accomplished that, though. And the thing is, I agree with you in principle that you can't leave it broken. You can't leave them vulnerable. Totally. That's for sure. You can't make it so that the minute we leave, innocent people are just going to get machine gunned down, Yeah. And I understand there's real issues in Afghanistan with, women's equality and stuff like that, which are at risk as well, which is really important, I don't know what the right answer is, but I don't think America staying in Afghanistan longer is the answer. I think it's prolonging a problem that we really shouldn't have started. That's my opinion.
I don't disagree that we need to go, but again, my whole thing is like, oh yes, and to your point that we had ample time to have done it. Yes, I agree. We have had ample time that we could have done it. But we didn't do that. We already didn't do it. To steal from Louis C.K. We already didn't do that.
Right.
So yes, we can chastise ourselves for not doing that, and we probably should, and I'm more than happy that we will. But we didn't do that already, so now we have to look at where we are today and how do we get out in the way that's best for the people that live there.
Sure.
And Vegas, fuck you. You love the tits. That's all you love.
I don't know. I think with Afghanistan, the problem is in Afghanistan. Well, a problem is every occupying army that's ever tried to rule Afghanistan has lost for over 200 years. You know, the local people just kick them out. They're quite happy with a war of attrition. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. You know.
I mean, the biggest problem right now is that, I mean, it's not just that though. I mean, basically, it's not like we were really suffering much in the way of loss over the last few years. Very little. But the thing is just the fact that it's still unstable, because the Taliban forces are still there. One of the problems is and I think this is one of the issues with other armies that have tried to, dominate Afghanistan is there is this mindset, especially with Western style militaries, that you're dealing with a country and a country's military, but you're not. It's tribal. I mean, yeah, sure, there's a central government and blah, 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 only because Western powers have imposed that kind of a system on Afghanistan. But right.
I mean, even though those systems exist within Afghanistan, the country doesn't operate that way. I mean, it operates the way it has for thousands of years. It's tribal, with tribal leaders in different regions, and it doesn't have the kind of. So when you go in there and you think, well, we're going to conquer them, this isn't an army.
And the big problem, and this is the problem with, again, this is another common thing of like, oh, the Taliban's the bad guy, they're insurgents, so we can't talk to them, we have to destroy them. There's, like you said, because of the tribalism, literally what we should be doing is saying, okay, let's sit the Taliban and the government and any other forces that are out there down and help facilitate talks so that they come up with something that they can all live with. Because it's kind of like the one mistake, or probably the biggest mistake in Somalia, because Somalia was being ruled by the warlords. And for some reason, the UN decided that we're going to pick one particular warlord to be the bad guy, because we always got to have a bad guy. And, so basically the ones that were cooperating with us were the good guys, and the ones that weren't were the bad guys. And then we got involved in a conflict to a degree that we weren't prepared to sustain.
See,
too many factions.
Yeah. I mean, your solution, Joe, is just another Western style solution, just to a lesser degree than what has already been done there. It's like it was never a complete puzzle. It was always a puzzle. It was missing pieces to begin with. Now we've gone in there, like the 100th country now to do it, have gone in there and knocked the puzzle all over the place and have been trying to put the pieces back together. No, number one, you're missing pieces. You're never going to really put it back together. That's number one. Number two, you don't know how the pieces went together to begin with. So
well, no, but
you're never going to do it.
But that's the whole point of getting them to basically, so this way you're not running the things, you're facilitating them discussing among themselves in a way that's peaceful. Because here's something too, remind people about Joe Biden. And where I think if anybody could pull it off would be him. He'd said ages ago about Iraq the exact same thing you're talking about. He said, we're trying to force fit a country that didn't exist until 1919, that was put together by Western powers in borders that didn't agree with the tribal borders. And so now you've got really 3 or 4 or 5 regions that don't really like each other, forced to be a country. And why are we insistent that there has to be a country called Iraq at the end of the negotiations? If the people there want to break into 5 different autonomous regions, let them do it.
And all of that is exacerbated by the landscape. I mean, it's like, so you're trying to perform military operations in an extremely unforgiving environment with people who both want you there and don't want you there, who love you and want to kill you, who will cooperate one day and not the next. No, you can't. I mean, Vegas is 100% correct. There is no good answer, and Pashtunian supremacy will inherit Afghanistan. And it'll always, always, always be a puzzle missing pieces. Always, 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 always.
Oh.
Ever since the was it the U.S. and the U.K. decided that it was a country. Ever since then, and always
it's not Pashtunian, it's Pashto.
Right.
Is the correct for the group of people.
Yeah. But yeah, always, always, always. And nothing we're gonna do about it. And yes, it's not a good idea to leave there with it so unstable. But I don't think that stable will ever really exist in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Now, as far as the tribal borders extending to Pakistan, here's kind of like what the world could really use is a realignment that kind of re-examines all these borders. Because you look at the Kurdish people, for instance, the Kurdish people are split across 5 different countries, none of which like the Kurdish people, but won't cede the land to let them have their own place. There's no reason why there shouldn't be a Kurdistan. It should exist. And all those countries that don't like the Kurds in the first place, who shoved them onto land that was shitty in the first place, should be willing to give up that land so that they make a Kurdistan.
But Joe, I love you, man, and I agree with you 100%. But you know what? That's another Western solution that will.
No, it's not. No, it's not, because that's what the Pashto want.
It is. Rob. There has to be border realignment, right? That's what you said.
Yes.
Who is going to do that?
Them.
Right. And what did you also just say? What did you also just say? They will not give up land, cede land, so the Kurds have. So the only way to do that is for Western powers to force it, and that is a Western solution.
Okay, maybe that's a bad example, but it's certainly in Africa. Certainly in Africa is the problem, because basically the tribal borders and the national borders don't match.
It's not just places like that, though. I mean, the whole of Africa has got 54 countries in it. Most of those borders are drawn up by colonial powers at one point or another. You know, and there are some countries which have, what's the word I'm looking for? Antagonistic ethnicities that wouldn't normally want to occupy the same powers. So,
well, and in fact, and that's not an accident. That was on purpose.
Which is terrible.
That was how the colonial powers made sure that the African people didn't really fight back against colonialism, is by sticking them all together with groups. So now, because the same thing happened in India. It's like, okay, so they go to this group. Hey, those fuckers want to kill you. You need us here to protect you. Then they go to the other guys. Those fuckers over there want to kill you. You need us to protect you.
Well,
Europe fucked up the whole world.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you could possibly redraw borders, because everyone getting everybody to have an honest broker, there'd be too many competing interests and I find it difficult to imagine how it could be done where there'd be local solutions on the ground. I want to divert slightly to something I was reading about maybe earlier today or yesterday. What's going on in East Jerusalem right now? Are you guys familiar with what's going on over there? No. I mean, basically, long story short, there's open ethnic cleansing going on. There are so-called contested neighborhoods now in East Jerusalem where they're kicking all the Arabs out, right? And if you've looked at the West Bank map over the past 20 years, you've seen the enclaves for the Jewish settlements getting bigger and bigger, and the ones for the Palestinians getting smaller and smaller, and they are basically limited in their own land. And what's going on over there is atrocious, and I don't see hardly anything about it in the mainstream media whatsoever, which I find suspect and disturbing. But that's a different conversation.
Well, there used to be a lot more talk about anything that happened in Israel between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And there's less of it now. And I think it's because we are just so steeped in our own bullshit.
Right.
I really do think that's the reason. It's
Oh, well, and of course, what ends up happening too, because here's the thing that I think is kind of sick. The right wing supports Israel and not Jews.
Yeah.
So hate Jews, love Israel, because again, it's because of fucking Book of Daniel, because they all need the Jews to be there so that Jesus can come back and destroy them.
Yeah, no. That's exactly
I know,
what it is.
I know. It's so ironic because it's not
dominionist.
That's a strange kind of love, brother. You know.
Yeah. So that's the reason why. So what of course is that they use, anytime if you say something that's against the Israeli government, they try to attach on that you're an anti-Semite, which is ironic because they actually are anti-Semitic. It's like, and the thing is, the biggest problem in Israel is the Likud party. Netanyahu and his party are fucking evil. If you think back to like before Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, when they had worked out the thing with Arafat, and it wasn't perfect. There was stuff still happening, but it was generally radicals. It was basically extremists that didn't want the peace to happen. That were and who was he killed? Who was being killed by? Actually, Jewish extremists. But I remember when things had been going well and Netanyahu got elected, and basically he and his party came out and said, well, that treaty was negotiated against the prior government. That's not binding on us, which of course it is. It's fucking law. It was ratified by the Knesset, so it's actually the law. But they just said, fuck you, and they just started doing this heinous shit. And unfortunately, what's happened over time in Israel is that a lot of this heavy hand stuff, because what Rob pointed out is that they're gaining ground. So a lot of Israelis that way back in the past might have fought against the Likud party. They're kind of like, the terrorism is down and we're getting the land back, so fuck it. And then so they don't care anymore about what's going on. I mean, there's a core of Israelis that do, and a core of American Jews that do care about what's going on. But for the most part, a lot of Israeli citizens have been mollified because there's less violence than there had been.
Well, what Rob said a moment ago really disturbed me because it's true. We've got so much of our own shit going on that we just don't hear this in the conversation very much. And it kind of disturbs me because that almost, I don't know. That's very convenient. That's all I can say.
That's what I was actually thinking about.
Advantage of the noise that's going on over here,
But that's one of the things I was thinking about. What Joe was saying about, not saying I'm fuck, things that other leaders of my country has said before. That was a different country. There was a different government. That's not my government. Once I was elected, fuck anything that happened before. All that matters is what's happening now. Yeah. How convenient. How convenient. All administrations should work that way.
I always, another one of those things when people who don't know who I am, and then they'll try to cast, anti-Semitism at me. It's like, well, gee, since I'm part Ashkenazi myself, I'd have to hate myself. I'm a Semite.
Is that we can I should write a letter actually to Biden. We should bomb Germany. Just because World War II ended in 1945 doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. That was a different government. Fucking idiots. This frustrating. Yeah, it's really frustrating.
It was funny because Suzanne always teases me because obviously I'm black, I'm Irish, I'm Jewish. Oh, and actually I got talking to some cousins on the other side of the family, found out that or at least confirming rumors that I had from a child that we actually are part Romani. So you're like an oppression smorgasbord, Joe. Like, is there anything in you that wasn't like somebody who got beat to shit? Oh, and part Scottish too. So like, everybody was getting fucking beat to shit by somebody.
You're part Roma.
Romani.
You're a gypsy. Wow.
Which makes sense because on my DNA I was getting less Eastern European than I expected from my Hungarian side, and I was actually getting like Central Asia to East Asia, and that's why, because the Romani people are people originally started from India and worked their way. So it's there.
Wow.
it's Adam Hungarian. Yes, I'm just a smorgasbord of oppression, man.
What do you guys think about what's going on in Israel and the West Bank and Gaza right now, though? Because honestly, Bernie Sanders, when he was running for president, said some pretty encouraging things about it. He was kind of like the most honest any politician's been about it, who's running for president anyway, for, well, at least since Bill Clinton, if not before, you know. And like lately, the conversation, I mean, Joe, you mentioned when Yitzhak Rabin got assassinated. I actually cried that day, and I didn't realize how much it mattered to me, because you knew that the whole thing was about to change. And what really pisses me off, it was some far right extremist in the, far right Israeli extremist who shot the guy, and then ended up getting what he wanted by the way, when Ariel Sharon took over the government, which obviously had Ehud Barak in between. But when Sharon went to visit the Wailing Wall and caused that big uprising, I mean, it was completely deliberate, and nothing's been the same since then. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse. It's like a spiral getting smaller of worseness right now. And I don't see enough American politicians talking about it. You've got basically Rashida and Ilhan, and that's about it.
Well, and I think it contributed in certain ways to 9/11 as well, because it's the whole anger in the Arab world about the way Israel treats the rest of its neighbors and blah blah blah, and that's why I said 20 years ago that the day Yitzhak Rabin was killed was the worst day of the 20th century. Because basically we were moving in a good direction, and since then things have been retrograde.
Yeah,
and that's the point where it got accelerated after 9/11, but that was the point where right-wing forces started to really get a foothold. And again, and as I said before, what's weird is usually conservatism of some brand, whether it's populist or more traditional, tends to gain hold during bad times, when there's bad economies and all that. And what we started seeing around the world in Greece and in Germany and Italy and all these other places, in Israel, happening at a time when things were relatively good. And that was scary. And we're seeing now it's even scarier than we thought.
What say ye, Raven?
When I'm not really familiar, I don't say nothing. So
yeah, but that's another thing too. Speaking of people getting accused of anti-Semitism, I remember, I forget, Bernie was basically saying something to about criticizing Israel for what it does, and some dimwit tried to call Bernie an anti-Semite. I'm like, I'm not one to generally defend Bernie, but Jesus fucking Christ, the guy's Jewish. I mean,
Yeah. I don't know. I get bothered by the fact when these conversations happen, the anti-Semitism card comes out, like, in my opinion, way too often. You can criticize a government policy, and there's nothing specifically Jewish about the Likud party other than it's a right-wing Jewish party, but that's it. It's, left-wing parties in Israel are also Jewish. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. I get frustrated by the tenor of the conversation, generally speaking. And the fact that at the moment there doesn't seem to be enough conversation about it means they're getting away literally with murder. you know, and I don't know if the Biden administration is even going to take this one on, because maybe they shouldn't, because maybe there's too much domestic stuff they need to do right now. I don't know. But if that means they get away with what they're getting away with over there because no one else can call them out, I mean, we should be withholding funding until they stop doing this shit, man, because it's gone way too far.
Yeah.
We send way too much money to Israel anyway, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and here's the irony of that. As I remember for years, the justification, there was two justifications for giving Israel a lot of money. First was obviously they're surrounded by enemies, they're attacking them, blah, blah, blah. We have to preserve them. Okay. That's compelling to a point. Although, again, we give them way more than it's necessary to do that. But the second part was that, well, we need an ally in the nation, in the Middle East, in case we ever fight a war there. We've fought 2 wars there now, and we can't use Israel as a staging point for. We couldn't use Israel as a staging point for either one. So that basically showed that one, maybe it wasn't a lie, but it turned out not to be true anyway. So having them as an ally didn't give us a base of operations, and that's actually why Gulf War II went so pear-shaped in the beginning, because they had to. Turkey would only allow us to do certain things, and Saudis only allowed us to do certain things. So we had to reposition a lot of stuff, and it screwed up our logistics, so that basically we couldn't put enough troops on the ground to sustain military operations. So what ended up happening is, you remember, we made a lot of progress in that first week to 10 days, and then there was a lull. The reason why is because we didn't have any relief troops, because you can't have people going 20 hours a day, making all, pushing, and for more than that amount of time, people start having dissociative events because they haven't had enough sleep or rest or anything like that, food or whatever. And we couldn't use Israel as a staging point. So as a result, and for that matter, so the B-2 Spirit bombers that flew actually had to fly from St. Louis.
Yep.
Their bomb runs were 32 hours, which is horrible for the pilots, incredibly inefficient, which means you only get one sortie every day and a half.
Right.
I just think that it's hard to run a country when you're supporting another country.
Mm-hmm.
We send way too much money to Israel. I understand, that we give aid to lots of countries, and yeah, we guess we should give aid to Israel as well. But if you, as a nation, can't defend your own borders, that's a problem. That's a problem, and it's a problem that throwing money at it, isn't going to fix. It's only going to prolong the problem.
Under Obama, he made a deal where they got $38 billion over 10 years, and I think that got increased under Trump. But just let's take that $38 billion. That's $3.8 billion. Let's just round it up to $4 billion a year. Their national health costs them less than that. So effectively, we're paying for Israel to have free health care for all of its citizens, even though we don't offer that to our own citizens.
Yeah, and actually, here's the other problem too with a lot of it, is that it's all about it's always couched in that thing about defending their borders. Here's the problem: those Arab hordes that we used to talk about in the 60s and 70s and 80s, those armies don't exist anymore.
Well, Israel and Saudi Arabia are kind of cozy with each other these days.
That's right, and also Israel's cozy with Jordan. Jordan's military is a fraction of what it used to be. We destroyed the bulk of the Iraqi army twice. Egypt is on good terms with Israel. Syria is in the middle of their own bullshit. Libya's basically doesn't have much of a military left anymore. So these big giant Arab armies that were largely funded by the Soviets, they don't exist anymore. This idea that they're surrounded by enemies waiting at the gate is bullshit. It hasn't been true in 25 years.
Yeah, and anyway, I just get I've always been bothered when I was a little kid and I found out that Israel supposedly had nuclear weapons, but they don't really admit it. I just could never understand why that's allowed. Why are you not allowed to not admit it? I mean, everybody knows you do, so just admit it. But they're allowed to not admit it. And would we let Iran get away with that, or literally any other country get away with that? I think the answer is no. And I don't understand why, a strategic partner or not, you shouldn't be allowed to play by such elite rules.
Also they're the technological and military power in the region, aren't they? I mean, they're the center of the region. I mean, it just is what it is. There's no reason, my point of view, there's no reason to support them the way that we are. You give them something. We give a lot of countries stuff. I mean, okay, fine. But we give them a lot of money. And we give them a lot of favor. And I don't see any reason for it other than reasons that are wrapped up in biblical bullshit.
Well, once upon a time, I think the original deal was when Carter was president, they made a deal with Egypt and Israel, and Egypt gets money as well. And they get paid not to go to war with Israel. That's my understanding. I mean, that's a a layman's way of putting it, but I mean that's basically it. They get paid to stand down, and Israel gets paid to stand down, and they're no longer antagonistic to each other. But like Joe was saying a minute ago, I mean that's basically means that they don't. There's no advantage for Egypt to run Israel over now.
No. No, not only is there no advantage, they don't have the strength to do it if they wanted to.
Well, no one does because Israel has nukes. I mean, this is the thing. This is why they should.
No, I mean, I'm talking about just conventional forces.
Fair enough. Point taken. But even so, I mean, in war, the side who's prepared to be most ruthless tends to win.
Yep.
So, that's going to be Israel in this case. When it comes to Israel versus Egypt, so Egypt's basically getting paid to stand down when they don't want to go to war anyway.
Yeah, I mean, forget about like nukes, just conventional forces in general. I mean, Israel is a force to be reckoned with in the region. I mean, we did them right. We set them up. We set them up nice, and they're and I mean, what military service is basically the law, right? Yeah, I mean, so no, they're no joke. They're no joke.
Yeah.
So I don't get it. Like I said, other than it being wrapped up in maybe old promises and biblical bullshit, I don't see why we spend so much on them.
Yeah. I just wish it got more light on it in the mainstream media. That's all, because it's been an issue that it's mattered to me my whole life, and I can't really explain why. It's just, especially during the 70s and 80s, it seemed like a lot of the problems in the world emanated from problems in the Middle East and worked their way out from there. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the terrorist thing at the Munich Olympics, and then the Israelis hit back really hard, really fast, and it was
It's a combination of relationship, all of their neighbors, and the fact that we did use that entire region like a chessboard.
Right.
I mean,
and the whole world for that matter.
well, yeah, but I mean that region. I mean, it was really, really carved up in between the Soviet Union and us. We just, proxy wars all over the place. Because why not?
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. It's just anytime I'm watching, any mainstream media and they start talking about Israel, honestly, I just turn it off. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't care. I don't care because it's frustrating. There is no answer. It's a waste of money. We can't feed people here and we can't give health care to people here, but we can support an entire other country. Fuck that noise. No.
No. Right.
No.
Yeah, I was looking at Israel forces. So they have over 2,000 tanks, almost 6,000 armored personnel carriers. Because beyond what they actually have in active service, they have stockpiles. So when stuff gets destroyed, they just pull shit out. They're ready because they know they don't have time to build shit. So they've got a major stockpile of all sorts of stuff. And then you look at the Arab armies, and they're not terribly impressive.
Jordan has a pretty good military presence, don't they?
They have 100,000 in their army. That's it.
Turkey is the best equipped outside of Israel.
Yes, and Turkey is a NATO member, and Turkey is not, they're not going to attack Israel because they're going to be out of NATO within a millisecond.
Right.
Yeah. They don't. I think they don't really want to be in NATO anymore, anyway. So. I'm kind of the attitude with Turkey. Fucked. They're I don't know. Very little use for that entire country.
The Syrian army is 130,000, which again is a fraction of what Israel has. Lebanese, let me see, 80,000.
Just as an aside, I've always wanted to travel through Turkey, but I would have to go with some Turkish friends who could speak the language so that I could just go all around like the remote countryside places. Because once upon a time, it's 2,500, 3,000 years ago, Turkey was the cradle of civilization in the West. You know what I mean? And there's ruins all over Turkey that no one goes to see, but they're just there, So you need someone local.
Well, I mean, there are a lot. Go ahead.
Yeah, Green Machine. Turkey is a Mediterranean power. That's why.
Yeah. And NATO wanted to have a presence that was closer to the Middle East. That was, and
to Russia. The Soviet Union's right there next to Turkey. You know what I mean?
Right. And that was the whole idea. It was a buffer. It gave us a foot in the region, and it never really worked the way it was.
Having Turkey and NATO was a super strategic thing because that's what precipitated the Cuban Missile Crisis, because the United States was putting missiles in Turkey, and Russia's like, that's right on our border, dude. You can't do that. And they're like, we're a NATO country. We can do whatever we want. You can't attack us because it's NATO. And so Russia's like, well, we're going to put bombs in Cuba then and see how you like it. And so they started to send all the bombs over, and we knew they were coming on the ships. And so we made the blockade. And I'm really glad I was only a baby then, man, because if I had adult awareness during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I probably would have popped like a fucking grape.
A couple of people might have.
Green Machine. Turkey's been in NATO since 1960.
Yeah, and Turkey is not the country it used to be.
No, it's not.
No,
Turkey used to be a very good ally. In fact, back I remember when Clinton was president, he visited Greece, and the Greeks were like freaking out and protesting and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, well, the United States should remove everybody from their bases in Greece and move them to Turkey. Because Turkey would have been happy to have him at the time, and it also would have been a big fuck you to Greece.
Yeah. It's when what's his face, Erdogan was here, and his goons beat up a bunch of Americans on the streets in D.C., and nobody ever did anything about it. To this day, nobody has addressed that. That just pisses me off. It's just like, when did we become the little bitch that the goons of other countries can just beat up on the street?
Right.
When did that happen?
Yeah.
No.
Listen, friends, I think I'm going to bring the live broadcast to an end, and I will thank everybody in the chat for being so, less trollsome than usual, shall I say. And And guys, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I'll see you in the after show. And everybody, thanks for coming. We'll see you next week. Say goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.